Hello? Hello? Hmm. Oh. Can anybody hear me? Hmm. Oh, I can see you. I can't seem to hear anybody. Oh. Tell you what, let me switch to chat. Can any of you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, there we go. I'm gonna switch to my computer real quick. I apologize. I'm late. I got stuck in traffic on the way home.
That's all right.
Okay.
Oh, now I've got my voice on.
Yeah. Give me. Trying to get it. Bring up the presentation on my big computer. Otherwise, I'll do it on my tablet. But give me one more minute. So who is 814?
I don't know.
Is that you, Marissa? No.
What? Which one?
814-232-1938.
Yeah, that's me.
Oh, okay. On both. I think I'm picking up a lot of there we go. Well, maybe not.
I'm going to mute.
Okay. Aha. I think if I'm doing this right, you should be able to see my screen. Oh, there we go. And almost there. Did you guys hear anybody else sign in earlier?
No, don't think so.
Okay.
No, I didn't see anyone, Jeff.
Okay. We have one new candidate that was going to try to join tonight.
Just that 814, but if that's Marissa, then no one else signed in.
Yep. Yep. So, all right. Let me open up. I apologize. Lecture slide. I think that's where did I park it? Sorry. I'll show you what I'm doing, then at least it won't be quite so dry. There we go. Lectures. And we are on 3.1. Huh. I think Jason was supposed to be on, but I guess in a pinch I'll do his lecture. But he might be signing on at 8 o'clock. So there we go. So are you ready to jump right into it? Let me see. Aha. And here we go. All right. So You know what? Actually, open it with PowerPoint. Well, maybe not. All right. Background noise again. Hey Becky, I muted you. Just if you want to get my attention, just use the chat. Okay. Well, I guess we'll do it this way. All right. Can you hear me, Marissa? Or can I hear you? Darn it! How did I mute everybody?
Yeah, I can hear you.
There we go. Oh, you muted yourself.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. I just want to make sure. Okay. There we go. All right. Well, I like PowerPoint better because it shows me my cheat sheets on a different screen. But I guess we'll. Ooh, are you cut off? Can you see like the whole slide, like the NSP shield in the upper right-hand corner?
I can.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay, it's a little cut off. I'm also monitoring myself on my tablet. So, anyway, I think that's about it. So this is tonight's. We have like 8 chapters to get through. Whoops. Hey, wait, go back. Oh, darn. Is it not gonna? Oh, man. You know what? Let me just see. We're getting off to a rough start. I wonder if I can open it in PowerPoint. Nope. All right. Well, I had you know what? Let's go to. I had a nice little introduction prepared, and it's not going the way I thought it would. So we'll do it the hard way. This is the one I was going to show you. This is a ski patrol training video. Oh, lovely. Can you hear it? Oh.
I need Tim. We'll meet him over there. And we start with 3 Just wait. Oh, Steve, come on, let's go.
Can you hear it? I'm going to skip just for time.
The investigation was started in 2008 by a local group of avalanche rescue professionals.
So they've introduced avalanche rescue cats.
Tim, I got Tim. No, this is for real, man.
We'll be working extensively with them in the bowl.
There's been a lot of hardships as well, particularly the training of a new carpet cat can be quite difficult, very labor intensive. It takes hours to train a new cat. As you know, felines they can be somewhat temperamental and very challenging to work with. Just getting into the industry, through.
We'll skip.
Got his hat, got his hat. You breathing? Pull it out. Great. Great. Roll it over.
That's Tim's first rescue. Tim the cat. You can't see it? Oh, darn, really? Marissa, are you seeing it?
Karka is the future of
No?
the curry bowl. Lined up on hot spot. Gun is locked.
Oop.
Ammo. Ready, switch cat. Ready, switch cat. Okay. Loading cat. Loading cat. Pressuring up the gun. What's the pressure? Go to 200 for this shot. Pressuring up gun to 200. Safety's off. Clear to fire. Clear. Fire. Fire.
Well, anyway, I never get tired of that video. The purpose there is mainly to get your attention, but to get you thinking about rescue basics. And what do you think the theme of tonight is going to be? It'll be scene safety, scene size up. So these are some of the things we're going to go through. I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint and read all of them to you, but so you can see these. They're the basics. How to stay safe in the outdoors, how to be prepared to be out there all day, that kind of thing. Modes of heat loss, disease transmission, which is going to be important. We're going to get to these pathogen standard precautions, BSI, which is really important. I probably should have highlighted that, and hazardous material. We're going to talk about PPE, components of scene size up, scene safety, chain of custody, and how to put on and remove disposable gloves, which is a skill that you could be tested on. Anatomy, physiology, working outdoors, you got them. If I go too fast or I'm skipping stuff, just let me know. You're not seeing the slides? Ah! Are you seeing them, Marissa? Huh. I'm going to unshare and reshare. Okay, now are you seeing it? Huh. Okay. Well, like I said, stop me. I'm trying to monitor the chat window, but it keeps disappearing on me, so get my attention somehow if you need me. Okay, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on crime scene management. That's really strange. Okay. So these are the basics of anatomy and physiology. And for Marissa, if you find that I'm covering stuff that you've already got, you can give me the thumbs up to move on. So anyway, homeostasis, temperature regulation, fight or flight, which is, we'll spend a minute on it, and immune response. So here we're seeing, a couple of patrollers bringing a guy down on the sled. He's obviously getting cold. This means, you could be out there for a long period of time. I know one time I ended up on the chairlift without a break for about 2.5 hours, and it was it was pretty ugly by the time I finally got down. So that's the theme. This is just talking. I put this slide in. It's out of the images that they give us. Didn't really have a place in the lecture where it fit in neatly, but what they're getting at is the hypothalamus is the part of the brain that regulates all your autonomic things like temperature, breathing, that kind of stuff. It also is responsible for your fight or flight response. And so that is a test question, which is the only reason this is here. You're not going to treat somebody's hypothalamus or anything. It's just there for the written exam. So you're going to want to remember these 4 methods of heat loss. We have convection, is when you have contact with something and it sucks the heat right out of it. You have radiation, where the heat, it radiates through the atmosphere. You have evaporation, which is, the drying up of a liquid, and that requires energy. It draws the energy from your body if you're the thing that's wet. And I said conduction, didn't I? I meant convection. Convection is lost to the surrounding air. Conduction is lost through touching or contact with something. Radiation is similar to convection, but convection is, the motion of the air. So cool air constantly blowing by like the wind, whereas radiation is you're standing in a still space and just radiating the heat out into space. Anyway, that's probably all you need to know about that. If you want more, stop me and we'll go back. So environmental considerations, mental preparedness, physical fatigue, and of course these are the 3 big things, especially on the mountain. Get a good night's sleep before you come out. Eat extra carbs. Well, I guess you could drink your carbs before you hit the hill, especially at our altitude, and avoid alcohol because alcohol exacerbates altitude sickness. Also makes you a little bit less able to respond to things. So, and of course, you can't be drinking on duty. So anyway, proper equipment, first aid and survival, rule of 3s. We're going to cover clothing, skin and eye protection. We talk about that every single morning. You've got to absolutely need eye protection because you get blowing snow, particles, tree bark, all kinds of things blowing around up there. And you also need protection on your eyeballs from the UV. You also need protection on your skin because you're going to burn really fast. Here's our rule of 3s. 3 minutes that you can die without oxygen. 3 hours you could die without proper shelter. 3 days is how long it takes you to die without water. 3 weeks is how long it would take you to die without food. 3 months, that one's a hard one, but so if you have as they say, the will to survive, and you don't have any people around, that's about how long you'll last before you just go totally nuts. So anyway, rule of 3s, it could be on the tests. You'll want to remember those. Hydration, pretty much drink water. I don't know, if you want me to say more than that, we can cover it, but that's about all we need for purposes of this. Prolonged rescue response, in other words, make sure that you're getting enough water throughout the day so that if we have a 3-hour extraction, you're not totally dehydrated and you become a patient yourself. Immune system, so send Jason an invite to the meeting. Are you talking to him now, Becky? I'll put it in the chat. and then you can forward it to him if you are okay with that. Then I'll keep going. OEC. Thank you. There's the link, and all he has to do is go there. He can join and be a host. So, okay. I'm not going to read all these to you. You can read them yourself, but I think the important thing with this table is these are things that will affect your immune system and could compromise you or a patient. We're going to talk in a little bit about sample, and these would be things that could also come out in sample that could affect how you're assessing the situation, assessing the patient. And of course, we can always go back and revisit those, or you could hit them on the replay. Slides will also be on the drive. Okay, so one of the first principles is scene safety and not becoming another patient yourself. That also includes protecting yourself from disease, which means using personal protective equipment or PPE, and also limiting exposure to contaminants and infectious diseases. So realize exposure is always possible. Even if you think you're totally protected, you might not be. Things can be airborne. They can be in bodily fluids are our two biggest ones, but there's other ways as well. Consider even things like when you go into the bathroom, it's super important to wash your hands because last person in there could have been sick, and you know, just by touching the faucet or the door handle, you could pick something up. So these are some diseases you want to be aware of. You know, your childhood programs, measles, mumps, rubella, all that. As a ski patroller, you're going to want to get I would recommend not just Hep B, but the whole hepatitis spectrum. I believe there's 3 different shots you can get now. I would get them because you are exposed to blood. Flu shot is a good idea every year. TB could be possible. You know, it's something to look into. That you just want to be up to date on all your vaccinations. It's also something to ask patients about. I did have a patient at Ski Apache once that had just recovered from, I want to say it was a massive salmonella infection. And she only told me about halfway through the assessment. I did have gloves on, but I would have had a mask and a face shield if I would have known that. So, and those are available in the patrol room. So standard precautions, you know, people could be infectious and not know it. I think, you know, these are pretty obvious without me reading all of them, but, you know, bodily fluids you want to limit. Use PPE, wash your hands a lot. We've also got those hand sanitizers by every door, so use them. For purposes of the practical exam, you could never, whoops, sorry, I was going to highlight BSI, but I went on. You can't emphasize BSI enough. So at every station, at every point, make sure that all the evaluators know that you're wearing your BSI. Decontamination disposal. We're going to wipe everything down with bleach pretty much. We're going to clean everything. If we need to clean up a patient, we'll do it with baby shampoo. We do have biohazard bags and sharps containers. Hopefully you know what those are. Biohazard bags we're a little protective of just because it's expensive, but know our local protocols. We will introduce you to those, but basically anything super bloody goes into a biohazard bag. Anything yucky, like snot, goes into the garbage. Dirty gloves, unless they're super bloody, go in the garbage. Follow local protocols. So we'll catch you up on everything else, but for the exam, that's what we need. All right. So and at any point, if you need a break, just let me know and we'll take a pause. So these are the real basics. And so the next 10 or 15 minutes we're going to spend on, like, probably I would say could be the most important part. So go figure, it's in the first session. We're going to do scene size up, scene safety, mechanism of injury, MOI, or nature of illness. Now you could have both at the same time. You could have a sick person that fell down and hit their head. Then they've got nature of illness and mechanism of injury. Number of patients, and need for additional resources. You're going to make this entire assessment, that's part of the primary assessment. You're going to do that within the first minute. So if you think you get a call riding up on the chairlift, you can see the incident on your way up, and then you ski down. You've already done your scene size up. You know what it looks like, how you're going to enter and exit, number of patients. You can see a person wrapped around a tree. You already know mechanism of injury. You should, by the time you arrive at the scene, you should have an impression of your safety and the safety of the scene. And you're going to know, okay, pretty much by the time you get there, I'm going to need a trauma bag and a sled. So that's what this primary assessment is. Right here we have, well, why don't you tell me, what do you think this is depicting? Not Becky. I either have you muted or I can't hear you. Oh, let me unmute you. Are you there, Marissa?
Yeah.
Ah, there we go. So what of those first few, what is this one depicting?
Well, there's a car crash and he's hit his head and his chest on the vehicle.
What feature would that be?
What? Sorry, what?
Oh, what part? Let me see if I can go back a slide. Oh, it won't let me go. Won't let me go back. There we go. All right. So which of these do you think the picture is trying to get at? Could be all of them.
Well, yeah, it's multiple. So you can do scene size up, number of patients, and the MOI.
Okay. I was thinking MOI, but you're right. It really is all of those points. So here, you know, it's obviously high-speed crash. You have a sudden deceleration of the vehicle, but not the patient. He's striking his chest on the steering wheel, so you've got blunt force trauma here. Hits his head on the windshield, so you've got potential head injury. So all that is mechanism of injury. Okay, so this is an overview. As we go along, we're going to emphasize all those things a lot more. You're going to hear MOI, scene safety, scene size up 1,000 times by the end of the course. So hazardous materials I'm going to do really fast. I think these are obvious. Do you know what the hazardous materials placards look like? I probably should have thrown one in there. They're the diamond with the number on them.
Yeah.
Okay. And I suppose you're in the Air Force Base, right?
Yeah.
Do you know where your material safety data sheets are?
Yeah, I'm in environmental actually, so we deal with hazmat now.
So it's okay to say, I got this, go on. But so MSDS, we do have them in the patrol room. We'll show you those at mountain orientation. For purposes of the test, recognize what the MSDS are, and just be prepared for a question or two on that. So here we go. Removing contaminated gloves. You're going to pinch the wrist. We're going to actually demo this and have you do it at the ski hill a couple of weeks. You're going to pull it forward like that, but you're going to leave your fingertips on the left hand exposed. Then, so what you're going to do is you're going to pull it off and ball it in your wrist. Then you're going to reach underneath, so you're touching the uncontaminated part of the glove. Pull it forward, and you're going to turn it inside out as you go. Oop, I guess that's it. And what you're going to end up with is one dirty glove inside of the other dirty glove, and hopefully you're holding onto the outside, the inside that just became the outside, the uncontaminated part. Then you can throw the whole package away. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And what we'll do is we're going to squirt grape jelly all over you and have you take off a pair of gloves. So, crime scene management, I'm not going to cover a whole lot. Let me know if there's anything there that doesn't make sense. Otherwise, I'm moving on. And here we go. Dealing with stress. So you'll find, I think that it is a big thing. You know, if we have a patient, especially if the patient were to pass away, but just a patient that's really seriously injured, you don't know, they go off in the ambulance, you might never see or hear from them again, so you don't know if they were okay, you know, horribly maimed, or if maybe they died at the hospital, and all that creates a lot of stress. You want to know the warning signs in yourself and others, so that, you know, if you see another patroller, you might say, hey, we'll pick on Fred. Hey, Fred, you know, take a break. I got this. I'll cover the patrol room for a couple minutes. You know, I think that's about it. Recognize that you know, if we have a particularly major incident, you might show signs of PTSD, and it's all natural. So, you know, we can bring in counselors and that. I'm sure if we had a particularly bad incident, you know, the Hill would do that. So, all right. So we're going to hit this really fast. Your safety is priority number one. Why is that? Because we only want one patient. Well, we wanted none, but we already got one. We just don't want more than that. Pay attention to your heat loss or heat gain, because you could be outside in the summer where you're baking in the sun. Adequately prepare yourself for rescue operations. That means the right clothing, equipment, food and water, and so on. Be in shape, get good sleep, eat right. We'll talk about your pack, what first aid gear you should pack. I do have a list posted. But basically, don't forget the compass, because you don't want to rely on electronics. Trail map, maybe something to start a fire with, whether it's a lighter or a fire starter, just in case you get trapped outside and it's a long rescue or lost. And basics like that. I would always carry at least a little bit of water with you in your pack. So rule of threes, read it, review it, be ready for it on the test. Standard precautions, BSI, PPE, know those and be ready to wear them. Oh, okay, dirty to dirty, clean to clean is how they remember the gloves. We'll demo that, and I think you'll get it real fast. Scene size up. So we have scene size up, scene safety, number of patients, mechanism of injury, nature of the illness. Remember that whole slide, because it's coming back 100 times by the end. Dangers in the rescue scene, which kind of goes back to protecting yourself. Hazmat situations, that goes back to scene safety. It's not safe. Get your material safety data sheets, know what you're dealing with, and call that in, let the experts handle it. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And that is it for Chapter 3. Do you want a break?
I thought you were moving on.
Okay. So, whoop, here we go. We'll go on to, I think it's this one now. Yes, okay. We're skipping Chapter 4 because that's going to be a special day where we actually stage a mass casualty incident and torture you with it, you know, on purpose. I'm going to skip the introductory video. It was cool, but unfortunately it just doesn't want to cooperate, so. I guess I'll make that a note for the other instructors. If you want to use any videos or animations, you'll need to use PowerPoint instead of Google Slides. All right, here we go, on with Chapter 5. So this one is actually a very hands-on kind of chapter, and so I'm going to do my best to describe it, but you really, that means that next Saturday is going to be super important because that's where you're going to learn most of the skills. So these are what we're talking about today. Let me know if you want me to stop and read the slide to you, which probably not. I'm gonna show you a picture of each of these. Are there any that you couldn't figure out on your own? I'll just make sure I hit them as we go through. Okay, moving on. The proper use of equipment to move, lift, carry a patient, transportation devices. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on the helicopter. Just very briefly. CPR during transport, very briefly there too. All right. This is first section, body mechanics, devices, moving, lifting, transporting, and CPR. Not the CPR class, just how to do it in a sled. And this is mainly what we're focused on with the moving and lifting patients part, is really protecting the spine. We also need to protect extremities as well, but if somebody has a broken ankle and we don't want to injure them at all, so we put the splint on first, but it's like damage to the spine, there's not going to be any life. So these are the sections. We have a whole section just on the spine, but I guess keep in mind that we're trying to keep this whole thing lined up and in the position you see it right here, and we will come back to the spine in a later chapter. But that's the theme for tonight, is taking care of your back. And here you see a picture of two people lifting a patient on a backboard. Would you say that's good or bad? Oop.
Good.
Okay, I agree with you. So power lift, you probably got enough of this in the Air Force. Lift with your legs, not your back. Use your abs, engage your abs to lift and so on. Power grip, meaning all your fingers and thumbs involved. Wrap your thumb around it. Don't let that thing. Don't let yourself lose your grip. Keep your head up. Another good point is, if we're doing a lift together, make sure that you're looking right in the other person's eyes before you lift. And lose some weight. I think they wrote this one just for me. Okay, good or bad?
Bad.
Okay, what's bad about it?
Well, they're bent over and they're supposed to be looking up, and their feet aren't even in shoulder width. Just pretty much everything.
Yeah. I wish I could have shown you the video. It was a whole bunch of people dropping patients, but I think I put it on our YouTube channel. So if you want to see it, it's there. Okay, so plan the lift. If you and I are going to lift a patient, we say, okay. big important thing is on 3, not 2, not 1. We're going to say we're going to lift, we're going to walk 3 feet sideways, we're going to step over that log, and then I'm going to set them on whatever that is over there, right? Know your limitations. So if you're like, hey, this guy weighs 400 pounds, I can't lift him. Get help is obvious, shoulder width apart, back straight, reach over your head. So we're not going to lift the guy and put him up on the top shelf or top bunk. And like I said before, good grip. Knees, legs. Got all those? Hope so. Oh, so we already did this. Transfer flat for very large patient. Portable stretcher. I'm going to skip through these till we get to the ones we use. Long spine board. That is what we mainly use on the hill. The long spine board is basically a splint for the back and legs. And when we get into splinting, you'll learn that we splint above and below the injury. Or actually, you learned that the other night with the Happy Tree Friends. And so, when you have something like one of the long bones in your leg or hip or something, they have to be on that board in order to splint, that big of an area. So, and there's a long spine board that you can see they're steering the feet, they're steered on with straps, so on. We'll do a whole day on that. Orthopedic stretcher, show you, there's a picture. It comes apart and you can scoop it underneath the patient. For, situations where it's just difficult to log roll them onto a spine board or, other things where it just might be difficult to get it underneath them, the whole thing locks together and becomes rigid. So I believe we do have one on the hill. They're put in place. That is a Stokes basket. Jason might remember, I think we have one on the hill. I've never had to use it, but I believe there is one there. That's when you're worried about them falling out. We do have these. The left is a KED, Kendrick Extrication Device. Don't get that confused with a KTD, manufactured by the same company, but totally different. I'm not going to get terribly into it. You might use that like in a car wreck or some other situation where you need to protect the spine, but you can't get access to lay the person flat. So the one on the right is a short spine board, same purpose, just different design. And here we have the pizza board. The one on the right is a real pizza board. The one on the left is similar to what we have in the patrol room, but more fancy. And it just goes underneath, or it goes on the seat of a wheelchair and holds their leg up. Pretty much that simple. There's another patrols version. That's a little more similar to what we have. It's actually a little more fancy than ours too. I think those are obvious. Don't drop a patient and do no harm. That's going to be the theme. So everything we cover for the next couple minutes are kind of built around how do we do the least amount of harm when we move the patient. So here you can see them on a, oh gosh, I forgot the name of that device. Hey Jason, I don't know if you're, or do I have you on mute? Can you help me with the name of that?
Oh, sweet. I'm unmuted.
There you
I couldn't
go.
figure out how to do that.
Oh. Sorry.
So it's it's just a three-way pulley system for low-angle rescue.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking of the thing that's like a sled.
Oh, the SCED?
SCED!
Yep. The orange thing? Yeah.
Yeah, I know it stands for something. I forgot what it is. It just basically wraps the patient up and it's real slippery so that you can slide them up or down a hill, tree branches, anything. So anyway, that's it. This is kind of our protocol. Do they have a spinal injury? If yes, protect the spine. That's the very first thing. No, then you're going to see this a lot once we get real hands-on is, sir, could you actually help scoot yourself into the sled, or could you sit up? Could you move over? You know, that kind of stuff. Do they need to be moved immediately? So the building's on fire and we got to get them out. Then we do an urgent move. If they don't need to be moved immediately, the building's not on fire, we're all safe, temperature's fine, all that. We're going to do we're going to plan the move out very carefully and do it properly. And we'll go over both of those types of moves. So urgent moves, that's their life is in danger. So you can see it could be threat to the patient, rescuer, both. Maybe it's they're on a very soft mattress. We got to get them onto a hard floor so we can do CPR. It's always life over limb. So better that we drop them on the floor quickly and maybe they injure their back, but we save their heart, and save their life. So typically before the assessment, usually less than 100 feet. These could all be test questions. Usually a drag, not meaning like something you're disappointed about, meaning you're going to grab some part of their body and drag them along the axis of their spine. That make sense?
Yep.
I imagine you probably got a little bit of that in the Air Force, right? You grab them by the vest and yank them out?
Not so much. No, I'm a civilian, so it's a little different.
Oh, I thought you were. I thought you were an airman.
Nope.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you don't get to do the fun stuff.
Not as much, I guess.
Do they let you carry a gun anyway?
No, I mean, not for work. No.
Darn.
Unless I'm hunting coyotes or something.
Oh, well, there you go. So anyway, greatest risks are, you can injure yourself, you could injure the patient. You're delaying interventions. The person's bleeding out, and yet we have to drag them out of the building so that they don't get blown up, that kind of thing. Whenever we move the patient, this will go for urgent and non-urgent, we want to minimize the risk of spinal injury. So that means you're going to still, ideally, urgent move, you grab them underneath the armpits and grab their clothing, and you kind of, one good way is you could crisscross your arms, but otherwise you just try to cradle their head on your forearms so that you're supporting the whole spine. And then by dragging on the long axis or the spinal axis, not dragging them sideways, that's going to minimize the risk, of injury to the spine. And that's, we also have the blanket drag and we have the feet drag. Grab them by the ankles and yank them out. But when you do that and you drag them down the stairs, then their head tends to go down every stair, and it's not good. Non-urgent moves, we have the human crutch. So this is going to be very controlled. The two-person assist, that's where we're each under an armpit. The chair carry, I'm going to show you a picture in a sec. Fore and aft is one person's got the arms, one person's got the legs. Back carries, we'll show you a couple of examples. And improvised is like, you know, you make it up. So there's the extremity lift. Key there is the person in the back is reaching under the arms and grabbing the patient's wrists. That'll help you lift. Here is, I thought I had more lifts than that. We'll see. Well, maybe I'll have to come back to it. This is a multiple person ground lift. So we're going to scoop our hands under. You're going to try to get the major landmarks of the body. So, you know, under the hips, under the knees, ankles, and you know, two biggest guys help if they cover the torso and the pelvis. That's where most of the weight is. And we're going to scoop. We're going to go to one knee, stand up, and then you kind of roll the person into you so that you don't drop them. That's not a great one. We don't use it a whole lot because there is more risk of spinal injury there. So definitely only for non-spinal patients. Bridge or beam lift. So you're going to get, ideally it's 4 people or more. You could do it with 3. And you can see there, so you're going to want to measure your, let me go back one. What we don't see them doing, but what I like to do is you plan out where your hands are going to go first. And you want to interlock your hands. We're going to do a little bit more of this on site, but you can see the first 2 people there. You're going to have the guy with the brown gloves, his hand might go in between the other guy's left and right hands. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense, but it will when we do it live. So we're going to scoop under, we're going to put our hands where we planned, and we're going to put our heads on each other's shoulders. That kind of creates some mechanical advantage. It prevents us from tipping over. And then we're going to lift just a few inches off the ground. And in most cases, we're just going to slide something like a spinal board in or something, maybe, you know, do something else to get the patient moved. And then we're done. Now, beam is a beam lift with movement. The M stands for movement. That might be a test question. And here we have a draw sheet. Oh, sorry. Did you have you have any questions about beam or beam?
No.
Okay, we'll cover it live. It'll be really easy once you see it. Here's a sheet draw. This is actually, or sheet lift. I'm sorry. We actually do it by, we don't have anything that fancy. We roll the edges of the sheet up so they're right next to the patient's body, and then gives you a nice little handle that you can lift with. We use it a lot to transfer somebody from, say, a sled to the gurney. You might use it for other places too. These positions, did you get these from the book?
Yeah.
Okay. I will not cover them in great detail unless you ask me. So, high Fowler, semi-Fowler, supine. And then here we have Rothberg. That's, well, I'll show you. It'll be easier. And then Trendelenburg is like, so here we have Trendelenburg. I don't know if you can see. That's like for shock. Her feet are higher than her torso. And then here's the Rothberg where, you know, knees elevated. And as with everything else, these are all position of comfort, so if the patient won't tolerate that position, we're not going to force them into it. Okay, so transport, we have toboggan, stretcher, and vehicles. We need to position them properly within the device, which is going to apply mostly to toboggan. We need to secure them so they don't fly out, and we can send medical equipment with them as needed. We can also send their equipment with them as needed. And if we don't need to, if somebody could carry their skis down, that's probably better. Here we have a toboggan package coming out to the patient. And here we have, this is actually somebody doing CPR, but I just wanted to show you their position in the toboggan. So obviously if we're doing CPR, our biggest fear is shock, so her head is downhill, feet uphill, and we'll cover that more in a minute. So I put this here, injury uphill. If you injured your feet, they go uphill. You don't want to, you don't want to be having your weight pressed down on your feet in that sled, right on the injury. If you injured your arm or your shoulder, you probably want to be head uphill. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
And there again, position of comfort. So if the person has injured their lower leg, but they insist that they're more comfortable head uphill, that's how we're going to transport them. And I guess the only factor there that would change it is if they're absolutely terrified. Head downhill is a pretty scary position to be in the sled. So you might say, listen, I don't want to send them into shock, because they're so scared. So we're going to go head uphill. So there's some mitigating factors. I think for testing purposes, know what kind of answer they're looking for, which is the one in red here. But if you should get the question wrong, just be prepared to defend your answer. Exceptions, we kind of talked about. Oh, I did not mention serious head injury would be head uphill, which I guess that's not really an exception. Because if you have a head injury, your head would go, the injury would go uphill. So, anyway.
Well, the exception is because we want the patient's head closest to us.
Yeah.
We always want the patient's head closest to us when we're transporting, and so you have to have a good reason why you're going to transport the patient's head uphill.
Yeah, so that is kind of a difference between the book and what we do on the hill.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, the book is always injury uphill, but you'll find that on the hill we actually mostly transport people head downhill so we can talk to the patient. But for purposes of the written test, just remember injury uphill. So, but shock would be head downhill unless it's a head injury. So I guess the point of these last two bullets is either one could be right. Hopefully they won't give you a trick question where you see both as a potential answer. And if they did, I would just challenge it and say, hey, I should have gotten that question right. So anyway, we're going to talk about these really fast. We do have kind of like golf carts. Of course, we have the snowmobile. We don't prefer to not use it if not necessary. We do have our sleds. We have a chair for getting down the stairs. We have wheelchairs. So that's probably about enough spent on that, unless you want more. Okay. Air transport, you're just going to need to know, you're actually going to need to know maybe one of these things for the test. So I would read it really quickly. Major concept is we have both. We're not going to fly fixed wing to the mountain, but we would transport somebody down off the mountain in an ambulance and take it from Cerro Blanco Airport. We will occasionally call in a helicopter and park it in one of the upper parking lots. You might remember that formula. I would not spend a whole lot of time on this because we're never going to have you fly a helicopter. And I guess big thing there is remember the pilot's in charge. Landing zone, I would remember 100 by 100, 8-degree slope. These all could show up on there, but you probably only get one helicopter question, if that, on the exam. So, oh, one thing though, for Ski Apache, what's a consideration for bringing in a helicopter? Oh, I'm not sure if you know. Kind of a scene safety kind of thing? No?
What was the question? Sorry.
Oh, so at Ski Apache, what's a consideration for the helicopter? Big one. I'll give it to you. So we have zip lines out there, and the zip line ends right near where we would land the helicopter. So, we always got to be watching for that, and, anyway.
So overhead obstructions, basically?
Yep. Communications are obviously important. There's a whole protocol. We have an entire book on helicopter safety, so I won't cover it here. Just know enough for the test. You'll probably have one question if you get that. And of course, we love acronyms, but I'm not going to really cover it. Stay low, stay out of the way, don't stick your head up in the blades, I think is, you know, don't have anything on you that could fly off. Okay, CPR in the sled. There's, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it because you're probably not going to see a question. I think the theme, though, is, we do it. We have done it plenty. We have our own protocol for it that's slightly different than the book, and I'm not even going to get into that until, until you pass the course and you're ready to get on the hill. So the major theme there is patroller safety. So we want to make sure the person giving CPR is safe. And we want to just give continuous compressions. If that means that they're not getting O2, you know, while we're doing our sled run, we'll do that. And like everything else with CPR, we're going to load them and get them to the bottom as fast as we can so that we can pass off to an ambulance. So I'm going to go on. Leapfrog, obviously, we're going to hop in and out of the sled. Well, not literally. I mean, you're only going to have a person in there for just a few minutes. Then one person's in, one person's going to go back out. Yeah, I'm skipping it because I don't think we're going to see it that much. Back, don't drop the patient. Good enough? Do you want to take a break? We got 2 more to cover before Jason's up.
I'm good to go.
Okay. Sorry, we have 3 more to go. Oh my gosh. This one I think will actually be pretty quick. Jason. Jason's barking at his neighbor again.
What?
No, I'm just kidding. I heard a dog.
I have a dog. My roommate got home, so.
It's fine. You'll hear my bird eventually. So, all right, here we go. So, anatomy and physiology, we're actually going to break this down in every single chapter. So, when we're doing the cardio chapter, we're going to talk about the physiology of the heart and lungs. The brain, we'll talk about, you know, all that. So, you're going to get the details later on. I'm going to actually go through really fast so that we can just hit the basics, and then you can come back and revisit as needed. So these are our objectives for today. Body position, cavities, homeostasis, remember that word, memorize it, love it. Anatomical terms for direction, location, movement. Okay, so here we go. This is the first part. Body cavities, body systems, homeostasis, and then we'll be done. Do you have a definition for homeostasis?
Have what?
Oh, do you know what homeostasis means?
Yeah, it's when the body tries to keep everything in balance and functional.
There you go. Perfect. All right, so I've highlighted a few things that are like always on the test. So anatomy is structures and physiology is functions. How stuff works. That probably will be a test question. So now we have anterior is what part, or what? Give me a plain English for these. What is anterior?
The nose is anterior to the ear.
Okay. I was just going to say front. But that's good. Posterior?
The back.
There we go. Superior?
Above, like towards the head.
There you go. Inferior?
Below. Lower.
Okay. Medial?
Towards the center line of the body.
Yep. And lateral?
towards the outside of the center line,
Yep.
towards the side. Proximal is closer to the heart,
Yeah, okay. And distal?
farther away from the heart.
Superficial?
Like on the surface.
Yeah, I know. Deep, I think we got. Internal? Well, internal, external, I think you got, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any trouble with right and left?
No.
Hold your hand up. Look at the back of your hand. If it makes an L, it's your left hand. I learned that in kindergarten. Okay, so how about flexion?
Bending, contracting muscle.
Yep. And extension?
Straightening.
There we go. Hyper?
Like more than usual.
Yeah.
Higher level.
It's not on the list, but what is hypo?
What?
Hypo? H-Y-P-O?
Low. Like a low
Yeah.
level.
Yep. How about Brady?
How about what?
Brady.
Brady?
Uh-huh.
I don't recall.
Brady is slow, and tacky
Okay.
is, it'll come up later. Abduction?
Away from the body,
Yep. And adduction?
towards the body.
There we go. Okay. So that's good enough for those. Normal anatomical position just means, how the body part normally looks. And we just covered all of these. So unless you want to cover them again, I think we got it. Okay. The one I guess we didn't mention is mid-clavicular, and then if you're talking about the long bones, we'd have mid-shaft. So you could have a mid-shaft humerus, mid-shaft radius, when we're talking about fractures mainly. So those will be important later because we do different things for mid-shaft or mid-clavicular versus proximal distal. That's good enough for now. Okay, supine, is on your what?
On your back.
And prone?
On your stomach.
There we go. Right and left lateral recumbent. You know what those are? It's
When you're on your side.
Yeah. And then we talked about semi and high Fowler. But know those because they're always on there. So what's that one?
Supine.
There we go. That one.
Prone. Left lateral recumbent position.
And what's another name for that position? With his arm.
Recovery.
Yeah. There you go.
The Haines, I think it was.
What was that?
Haines? The acronym? I forget the whole point of the acronym, but.
Recovery position is what I was looking for. And sometimes in recovery position, you'll bend that top leg or the right leg so that it acts like a kickstand. But anyway, good enough. So organs, we have the cranial cavity, spinal, thoracic, abdominal, pelvic. Any trouble identifying those 5 cavities?
No.
All right. There they are, just in case you were wondering. They will ask you things about what's another name for the thorax. Where would you find this organ is in the abdomen or thorax? But we'll cover those in detail later anyway. Oh, and also remember these words: dorsal and ventral. You are. So dorsal would be what part? Or near what?
I forget if it's the front or the back.
Yeah, dorsal would be on your back and ventral would be on your front.
Okay.
So, body system is a group of organs. There's 11 systems that we're going to cover. Respiratory, I think you know the respiratory system, I hope. There's a picture of the organ. One, you're going to want to memorize this picture because I almost guarantee you there will be an exam or exam question that says, please label the organs of the respiratory system in order from outside the body to inside the body, or top to bottom, or something like that. So I won't cover them now. We'll actually cover them in the respiratory chapter, but just as a reminder, memorize, know that picture well. So we have the anatomy, physiology, what it does, how it does it. We're going to cover it in detail, so I'm not covering too much here. There's more. Oh, you know what? I'm going to skip the functioning of the respiratory system just because we're going to cover it later. But there's some important things about how it functions that you want to know, like what the diaphragm does in terms of expanding or contracting, and what the intercostal muscles do. But we'll do that in the respiratory chapter. Cardiovascular, pumps blood, there's some blood cells. Heart, 4 chambers, you're going to want to know the 4 chambers and their position, because that will definitely be an exam question. Cardiovascular system, you can see arteries, veins. Remember, there are 2 arteries and veins that are reversed. So arteries take blood away from the heart, veins take blood back to the heart, but there are one set, I guess I should say, one vein and one artery that you reverse the color, so let me put it that way. Do you know what they are?
Pulmonary?
Oh, you got it. Wow. Awesome. So there's the parts of the blood cell, or the components of blood, know that. Physiology, blood pressure, pulse pressure, do you know what those are?
I forget the difference. Blood pressure is the pressure on the interior side of the arteries.
Oh, good enough. Yep. Artery, veins, capillaries. Know that. We'll cover it more in cardiovascular chapter. Nervous system, central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, voluntary and autonomic. Do you know the difference between those?
The voluntary, it's when you control it yourself, whereas autonomic happens on its own.
Okay. Can you give me an example of autonomic?
Breathing happens automatically.
There you go. All right, body system. There's the parts of the brain and spinal cord. We have the gastrointestinal system. I'm going to start moving faster. Urinary system removes waste. There's the male urinary system. The organs in it in the endocrine system. Endocrine is hormones. Physiology, blood glucose. Let's see. More endocrine glands. Integumentary, which is the skin, hair and nails, sweat glands. There's your functions. We're actually going to go over that again later. Skeletal system adds structure to the body. There's the structure of a bone. You're going to want to know the number of vertebrae in each section. You want to know the order of the spinal section from top to bottom. We're going to cover it more detail in a later chapter, but if you want to cover it, we could. Moving on. Okay. Muscular system. Know the difference between skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscle. Those are the 3 types. Do you know the difference offhand?
Yeah, the smooth muscles are with the organs.
There you go. All right. Okay, I'm going to go faster so we can catch up. Reproductive system. We had that numerous times in school. Male, female. Won't cover that in great detail, but we will later. So, lymphatic drains fluids from tissues. And there's the lymphatic system. Homeostasis we covered, right? And I think you got it, so I'm moving on. There's a chapter summary. I am going to skip through it rapid fire so we can get on to the next one.
Okay.
All right. Anybody need a bathroom break?
I'm fine.
Okay. 2 more chapters. I think so. I wish I could see it's cutting off my. Oh, there we go. So this is the next one. Chapter 7 and then Chapter 8. Chapter 7 I'm going to spend a bit of time on. Hopefully not too much so that I can get Jason going. And well, we do kind of need to record it too, so trudge through. I apologize. There's a lot of material tonight. It's going to be a little longer than normal. All right. Patient assessment. Okay. I wanted to show you this one. Have you seen this? I won't play it otherwise.
I have not seen it.
Oh, really? All right. You know what? It's worth spending. It'll take us 30 seconds. Tell me if you're horrified. Oh, there we go. It's first one comes up. Chairlift malfunction, Georgia. What this was a chairlift rollback. Actually, I'll play you this one. You don't need the sounds to know what's going on. Oh, for goodness sake. Grandma spaghetti. Okay, just watch. Tell me what you're thinking about here in terms of patient assessment.
Ooh.
Yeah. So we
Wow.
Yep. We talked about primary assessment. Do you see the guy run in front of the chair that's coming at him at high speed? So primary assessment, number of patients, a lot. This would definitely be mass casualty incident. Mechanism of injury is one thing we're going to want to think about here, because we've got some high energy. Need for resources. What's one thing that I don't see people doing a lot of that should be the first thing, but maybe right after scene size up, maybe before.
Before what?
Before scene size up. We always say it after, but it really should be before.
And get to a safe spot.
Yeah, exactly. Scene safety. So this scene is not safe. People are being thrown off chairs. You know, equipment's flying around. You've got a mechanism with high energy in it that, you know, literally that thing could just rip your arm right off. It's very dangerous. And even now, you know, it's stopped, but I would not call that safe. It's probably a little beyond what we would do is we would go for what's called lockout and tag out, meaning we would locking out all the energy so that that thing cannot physically move anymore. And now the scene is safe, and then you can go in. But all these people, you know, God bless them, but they're putting themselves at risk by rushing in like that. So anyway, so we're going to talk more about assessing the patient, but I wanted to emphasize scene safety and protecting the rescuers. Two parts of the patient assessment. So we talked about primary assessment. What do you think the second part is?
The secondary assessment?
There we go. Can you give me the ABCDs?
ABCDs?
Uh-huh. Do you know what they stand for?
Yeah. Airway, breathing, circulation, disability.
There we go. Awesome. You read. So we're going to talk about decap bottles. What was that? Oh, did I leave you? Sorry. I left YouTube on and it's yelling at me. Who's shouting? Okay, I'm sorry. It was weird too. It was just like somebody said, "Hey, hold on!" What the hell? All right, we'll go over these other things. I'm not going to read them right now, but these are the objectives for right now. Pupils. Did you read AVPU and Glasgow Coma Scale?
Yeah, I read through that.
Okay. Respiratory, blood pressure, heart rate. These are vital signs. We're going to cover that. When I get there, I'm going to show you a cheat sheet that I made up that I hope will help you. So there we have scene size up, scene safety, patient assessment, chapter summary. So there again, emphasizing scene safety. What should you do to ensure rescuers are safe? If we're on that chairlift scene, we are going to make sure that, I mean, you're not keeping people out of there, but we're not going to rush in until we've got lockout, tag out. Here's a couple other examples of scene safety. So you can see in the upper corner, you've got a piece of heavy machinery. Who knows if that thing is running? it's dangerous. It could, it could kill you, and we can't even approach that man no matter what happened to him until that machine is shut down. And what do you think with the ski hill I'm showing you there? What's the scene safety implication there?
I'm not sure where the injured person is, but making sure nobody's coming down on you when you're going there.
Exactly. We just need a little crowd control there. It might even include shutting down that run. So. There's the universal symbol right there. As the skis crossed in the snow, means please don't hit my patient. Always uphill. And one thing is recognize that the cross, when it's on your back, turns into a bullseye. And it says to everybody coming down the hill, please hit this person from behind while they're leaning over the patient. So, and not even kidding, more patrollers get hit by people that just get like hypnotized by their cross. They're like, well, run right into you. Okay, so these are the elements of the primary assessment. We have chief complaint. What's going wrong? Are we looking at trauma, medical, both? We try to pinpoint the complaint to a location the size of a quarter. And very first thing is life-threatening. So that's our ABCDs. Next thing we're going to think of is mechanism of injury or nature of illness. How did you get hurt? Or what's the source of your medical problem? And also included in MOI is how much energy is involved. Was this like you tripped and broke your ankle, or is this you got hit by an airplane going 600 miles an hour and you're probably paced? Initial patient appearance, the expression on their face, are they bleeding, their color, are they sweating, any deformities, that kind of thing. So, and then be thinking about how we're going to prioritize. So is this the kind of thing, broken finger, maybe it's okay for this patient. For another person, it might mean we're calling an ambulance. If they're freaking out, not good mental status, we're probably thinking call medical. I would agree, it's our most important skill for at least for a ski patroller, because we need to be able to identify what's going wrong and get them to the appropriate level of care, and also prioritize them. Can I leave this person here while I take care of the person with the head injury, or do I need to call extra sleds and get them both off the hill immediately? Whoops, sorry, went backwards. We're going to identify, assess, and I would say treat all life threats. If they don't have an airway, we're going to get them an airway. Then we're going to give them breathing. Then we worry about circulation. So they go in this order. And then disability can mean both, meaning a disability is in they're not going to be able to walk or move their arms. It can also mean mental disability. So if they were originally unable to communicate, that's one thing. But if they were high functioning, normal, and now they can't speak, something else is going wrong. So, and CSM, circulation, sensation, motion. I frequently say CMS, but however you see appropriate. And level of consciousness, we'll talk about. Sample, do you have these down yet?
I'm still memorizing them.
I would recite them and get people to work with you on sample and OPQRST several times a day, and just keep repeating these starting now until you got them down flat. You should be able to do sample in about 20 seconds. So, hey Jason, are you still off mute?
I think so.
Let's say that you have an appendicitis. Let me run through sample with you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This year I'm Jeff with Ski Patrol. Can I have permission to help you out today?
Yeah, please.
All right. What seems to be the problem?
My stomach hurts right to my lower right.
It's in your lower right, and so I would palpate right away. Does it hurt there?
Oh, yeah, that hurts really bad.
Okay. I'm not going to touch that again. Do you have any allergies?
No.
How about medications? Do you take anything?
Yeah, I've been taking some anti-inflammatories.
Really? You have high fever?
No, just so.
For pain? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any history, or has this been going on for a while? Anything like that?
No, not really.
Did your grandfather die of an appendicitis?
No, he died of a heart attack a long time ago.
Oh, okay. And can you just tell me what happened, like leading up to you sitting down and waving at me?
I've been skiing for the last couple of hours, and every run down the hill, my stomach just gets worse and worse, and I just can't move anymore.
Okay.
It just hurts like that.
So we'll go on from there, but that's really how fast it should be. And so let's go on with OPQRST. So for medical or pain, you would apply OPQRST, and I'll let you read them while I do them. So hey, Jason, when did this start?
Just a couple of hours ago. It's been getting worse with every hour that goes by.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I just got ONT. Is there anything that I could do or that you do that makes it worse?
Bending over at the waist and touching that part of my belly hurts.
Okay. I'll try to not do that. And what type of pain are you experiencing? Is it sharp, stabbing?
Yeah,
heat?
real sharp pain.
Is it just in one small area, or is it all over?
Really just that area right there.
Okay. And does it radiate or like move out, like say across your body or down your legs?
No, it's kind of right there in that lower quadrant.
Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being no pain at all and 10 being the worst you've ever experienced, where would you rate this?
This is like a 9.
Okay. And how is it changing over time? Is it getting better or getting worse?
It's getting worse.
Okay. So that give you a good enough example?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. And, if you can get people to practice, just say, hey, could you have an appendicitis for me, or could you pretend you cut your face, or, whatever you can think of, and run through those as many times as you can. All right. So secondary assessment is a systematic head-to-toe assessment. It does require touching, so you're going to want to get their consent to be touched before you start. Definitely want BSI. Sometimes that's for them too, but it's also because sometimes patients are gross, been skiing all day, they're sweaty. Seen people with blood and pus all over them. I've seen people with, I hate to say it, but I've seen people with bugs in their hair, and not everybody is well groomed. So you definitely want gloves on. You're going to look for decap bottles, which we'll talk about in a sec, and then you're going to touch. I think the key that maybe we'll get to later, but I'll say it now, is you want to touch the injury last, because once you've touched it, they just blow up and they don't want to be touched anywhere else. So do everything else first, then come back to the injury. I go from head to toe. I tend to go from top to bottom, so they're doing extremities last. I do head, torso, arms, abdomen, pelvis, legs, feet. But you can do it. The key is just establish the order that you do it, and do it that way every single time. And expose is really important, especially to pass the exam, but it's also important in real life. You need to see that injury, so if that means you're cutting off their $500 snow pants, guess what? They're coming off.
Yeah.
Deformity, separations, puncture, penetration, increase tenders, tenderness, lacerations, and swelling. Any questions? Sorry?
Not at the moment.
Okay. You're going to want to memorize that, but basically, if you could sum it up in 2 words, not normal. You know what a normal human body looks like. If you see deformities, you see they're white, but they have this weird purple and green spot, or their arm is wrapped around the wrong way, they have 2 elbows, 2 ankles, anything like that, they've got something wrong that we're going to treat.
And the only reason really to memorize decap Biddles is not because you're going to use it as you're looking for what's going on with the patient, but you need to know the terminology so that when you report on what you found, you can say, hey, my patient's got a laceration about 4 inches long on his forearm, on his left forearm, and cause that sounds a whole lot better in a report than my patient has a really long cut on his arm.
He's got a boob.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's really the only reason to memorize DCAT vitals is not only for the test but for reporting. So.
Yep. So these are our vital signs, and actually I think reporting is another lecture for today too. So vital signs, we have AVPU. Do you know what that is? That's the easy one.
Alert, verbal, pain, unresponsive.
There you go. So we're just going to assess that. What are they on that scale, AVPU? Their pulse, rate, and quality. So you have strong, thready, weak, respirations, rate, and quality. So they're taking full. Is it rapid? Is it, shallow? Blood pressure, regular. Do you know what orthostatic blood pressure is?
It's when they go to stand, when they were sitting down or laying down.
You really did read ahead. That is, yep, there you go. Do you know what a low orthostatic blood pressure, do you know what that indicates?
I forget.
It's a sign of internal injuries, internal bleeding. So we don't use it a whole lot because usually they're off to the hospital before we would need to do that. But it's a technique you could use to say, ooh, I think maybe you're bleeding internally. So anyway, and temperature. So we'll cover how to do all those on the Hill. I'm not going to get super detailed today. Very important, unresponsive patient, we're going to assume C-spine injury. They can't tell us that they didn't hit their head, so we're going to assume they did. Communication barriers, that could be, unless you speak Spanish, at Ski Apache, we get that quite a bit. They're native Mexican and don't speak English. Could be sign language speakers, could be somebody that's not able to speak at all, or, that kind of thing. That, I guess, is kind of cultural, too. Aggressive behavior could be a sign of head injury. Could also just be a real jerk. Either way, you're not going to probably be able to get through your assessment if they're being super aggressive. And then pediatric and geriatric patients have some special considerations. I think we'll get to those in a minute. Environment, obviously if we're in sub-zero temperatures, yes, you want to expose, but if you're close enough to the bottom, you could take them inside and do it. Maybe we'll forego that till we're inside. Same thing, we don't want to give somebody a sunburn by cutting all their clothing off and taking them on a 3-hour trip down the hill. Wind, dust, rain, all that. We don't want to get them expose their skin and then get them wet and cold. So reassessments. We are going to cover it in more detail, but I'll give it to you now. If somebody is not in shock, so they're stable, how often do you reassess?
Every 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah, I would say 20, but that's good enough. And then how often if you're suspecting shock or fearing they'll go into shock?
3 to 5 minutes.
There you go. All right. And you're going to check their ABCDs and vitals, recheck them periodically. So, scene safety again, scene size up. Okay, I'm skipping through the summary, unless you really want to go over it.
No, that's
okay. And I think, I apologize, Jason. I know I'm horribly behind. Oh, yeah.
It's all right.
More chairlifts. Okay, last one for me, and then you get to have Jason all to yourself. But I think let's do this one, and let's take a 5-minute break. Does that sound good?
okay.
Yeah. And that'll give Jason a minute to get set up, and we can hand off control and all that. Okay. Here we go. It's going to be really fast. We're talking about medical documentation, so that's filling out all your paperwork. Communications also includes things like using the radio. We will cover that on the Hill. There's not a whole lot on the test, so I'll hit the high points and we'll call it a night. Well, call it a half a night. Okay, we're going to talk about Sailor, SOAP, and Cheated. We're going to talk about Factual AC because we love these acronyms. Written reports, patient refusal is an important one. Crimes that you are mandated to report. sample patient care report, we'll actually do that out on the Hill. We'll show it to you. But chances are, within the next few weeks, you might actually get to fill one out, a real one. So there we go. Communication basics, verbal versus written notes, special circumstances. We all carry a pen. Sharpie is great to carry with you. If you have a Sharpie, you can actually take notes on your glove and turn your glove in with the patient. But notebook.
We carry a pencil too because if it's cold enough, the pens freeze.
That's true. Yep. Sender, receiver. Trying to skip through what I don't need. Tell me if you see anything you want me to stop on or it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We use radios. So the way we do it at the ski hill is we carry some forms with us on the hill, and you might use some of those out there, like a refusal of care, or even I don't think we carry many releases, but so you might take somebody's vital signs out on the hill, and then that's going to stay with their record, and we'll staple it to the report we fill out in the patrol room. Then we do our big one in the patrol room. There's additional addenda that go to it too, so that's probably good enough for today. Sailor, I think I'm going to get to, there we go. Sex, age, incident, location, and I got my fancy automation or animation working. Equipment needed, resources needed. Oop, sorry, went too far. You're going to want to know this acronym. Basically, this is what we're going to communicate back to the base whenever we.
I'm going to say that's not really because we usually say the sex, the age, or the incident. We just do location, equipment, and resources.
Yeah.
That's for calling for an ambulance and then go on the sex and age and the chief complaint. But otherwise, over our radio system, we just want location, equipment, and resources.
Yep. For taking the written test, just remember all of them. So written, we have our I think we already covered it. We got our notes from the fields. We've got our incident reports. We've got patient care reports. We have patroller summaries, witness reports, all that good stuff. So this picture is there because it was in the slide. I'm not really sure what they're trying to show, other than maybe that he's taking notes. But most important thing here is that you're going to want to take really good notes because your memory 2 years from now, when it finally goes to court, is going to be non-existent. So, and it could save the patient's life too by taking good notes. Formal accident report handoff. So our forms are, they mentioned some sources. Ours are actually created by Hill Management, presented to the Into the Mountain Gods and approved, and then they're our own. But they're also, they're made to comply with the Forestry Service and the insurance company. That's probably more than you need to know about that. You can see the features of it. I won't read you the bullets. So SOAP and cheated, I hope I have a slide on those. There's a sample form. That actually does not look too different from ours. Okay. So subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. Those are the elements of a good report. You have the subjective things like what could you have done better to avoid your injury? Objective, like what's the temperature, the conditions at the scene, that kind of thing. Your assessment, that's the patient assessment and the assessment of the situation, and then our plan for how we're going to treat transport. And then, slow me down if I go too fast. But so we have cheated. So chief complaint, what was wrong? The history. That's the patient's medical history plus the events leading up. That's why we asked that in sample. The examination, what we found. The assessment, how we. That's our discoveries. The treatment, so we put a splint on them. Evaluation is the ongoing, and then the disposition is we send them to the hospital, we send them home. Is that enough detail? I hope. Okay. Characteristics of good report writing. Can we skip and say memorize factual OEC? They're kind of common sense stuff, but it could be a test question, so come back to it if you need it. Medical communications, age, gender, chief complaint, history, past medical history, physical exam, impression, treatment, and response to treatment. These are the things we're going to want to tell the ambulance crew when they arrive. Make sense? Okay.
Yep.
Special circumstances, so we deal with refusal of care a lot. You're out on the hill and so-and-so says, this is my son, I don't want him taken down in the sled, but he's got a broken leg. You know, we can't kidnap somebody's son and force them if they're to, you know, I don't know, drag him down by his jacket or something. We prefer not, but ideally what we get is refusal of care. So we'll say, listen, I will, you know, go on my way, but I'm going to have you sign this form that says I offered to treat and transport your son, and you refused, and, you know, that will help. Simpler things are just, you know, sometimes we transport somebody to the bottom, and we say, well, it's our protocol, bring you in and check you out, and they'll say, I don't want to, I just want to go home. Well, okay, here, sign this form. Incidents that must be reported to authorities, so that's things like child abuse, crimes. There's probably more. I'm not going to cover them in great detail. Just recognize that there are certain things that we're required to report. You know, obviously, if we thought somebody had been murdered, we have to report that. Accident investigations, that's the, pretty much, we wouldn't necessarily call for an investigation on the radio. We would say, hey, I'm going to need Fred and Justin up there. They know what that means, and they'll come out with the camera and the tape. Questions there?
Nope.
Okay. I'm skipping. And that should be enough for you to come back if you need to. The replay will be up in a day or two, and then if you want to, you know, do that, or you want to review the slides will be posted to the Google Drive. Otherwise, that is it for me. Jason, do you need me to open your slides, or do you have them?
I have them available to me, and they have my notes at the bottom. So that's the only thing I'm trying to figure out how to use.
Oh, I can pass control to you?
Okay. How does that happen?
You mean one? Oh, so Marissa, if you want to take a 5-minute break, I will figure this out.
Okay.
And Marissa, are you good to go? I can probably do about an hour and 15 minutes. I know it's getting late though. How are you doing? Marissa?
Uh-oh. She may have stepped away because she's not muted.
Okay.
I passed control to you. Do you?
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. What do we got here? You're nominated to become a presenter. If you share your screen with other attendees, please select a monitor window or a couple of windows from the list that you want to present. Desktop, calendar, inbox. Oh, how cool is that?
Hey, we did it.
Okay.
Well, I almost page.
Let me see this document syllabus. I guess I can just do my desktop. Let me see if I can do something really quick.
Okay.
A second here.
I'm going to go on mute in a minute so you don't hear the bird and all the other stuff.
Yeah, no worries. Trying to figure out how I.
Do you have like a play button on your controls?
Yeah, I'm trying to get. How do I get there? Oh, I see. Let's see if that shows up.
Oh,
Yeah.
Marissa says I accidentally hung up. I'll call back in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Oh, it says you're the presenter.
Okay. What do you see?
Yep, I see your screen.
Okay.
Meeting viewer QA mode. Here we go.
Okay, present. I want.
How about that? Yeah, these first couple of sessions are long.
Yeah, I realized what I did last time is I had 2 different monitors, and so I just had the students looking at one monitor while I could look at all my notes on my monitor.
I was trying to do the same thing, and I did it in Google Slides instead of PowerPoint, and it won't let me do it. So
it worked really well last time.
I know.
Presenter view.
I guess the advantage to Google Slides is that you just run it right out of Google Drive. So I have the slides up there, and just in case I couldn't get at my computer, or something.
Yeah.
But I think next time I'll download them and then present, from PowerPoint. But oh well.
Yeah. I thought maybe I had a keynote.
Oh.
What do you see?
I see like a weird, kind of like see-through white square in the upper left corner.
Yeah, that's the dolphin.
Whoops. Accidentally closed the screen. Ask a question at Google Slides.
Yeah. Yeah. So now do you still see my Chapter 9 Airway Management?
Yep. I see the slide, and I can see your notes, but...
Okay. I also have to see my notes.
Worst case, just, I winged it. I didn't read my notes.
Right. Yeah. I wonder.
Ooh. It suddenly got blurry. That might be me.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
I'm going to go on mute.
Okay.
Wait, now I don't know how to do it. Here's the...
There you go. You got it. Marissa? Hello? Jeff, can you unmute her since she just joined?
I got me, and let me try. Marissa, can you hear us?
Yeah, I think it just unmuted. Can you hear me? I can hear you.
I got you.
We can hear you now. I get you.
Keeping this up.
Cool.
Hi, Marissa.
Hello.
So I didn't get a chance to be at the beginning of the meeting, so maybe you guys kind of already did this, kind of an introduction. But do you mind telling me a little bit about your stuff, especially so I kind of know where you're at in training and where you're at in your previous medical experiences?
I don't have any previous medical experiences. I've been working on the readings. Right now I'm on chapter 10, so I haven't covered quite everything for today, but I'm catching up, so getting there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, sweet. Well, I came to OEC as well without having any real tangible medical experiences before. I'm actually a Lutheran pastor here in Ruidoso, and I've been on ski patrol now for 3 years, and this is my second year as an instructor. And so I'll try not to take too much more of your time. Thanks for putting up with a really long session tonight.
Yeah, no problem.
These sessions really aren't going to do anything for you in terms of teaching anything new, but hopefully it'll re-solidify some stuff you already read. And then the majority of the teaching I'll cover in these sections, what we're going to do up on the hill. And so the stuff that's skills-oriented, I'll just tell you, we'll go through that in detail up on the hill so that you can see what it's like hands-on.
Sounds good.
That's like a reasonable agreement, and then if you'll just stop me when you have a question. I'm going to try to go through chapters 9 and 10, and then I'm going to share a little personal experience that I had on Thursday this last week, where during a Bible study, one of my parishioners just went sheet white, started sweating, had virtually no pulse rate, and had a heart attack right in front of us.
Wow.
And so it was really interesting because I got to use these two chapters, airway management and shock, really, as the two things that I did, and altered mental status, chapter 11. But it was just kind of fascinating to be like, oh, shoot, oh, there you go, I just used it. So it's kind of wild. We'll cover that at the end because we'll pick out some of the spots in shock, in the treatment of shock. Some of the stuff I did well, and some of the stuff I really didn't do well, and so we'll learn from that together.
Sounds good.
All right. Where are you at in the country, by the way? Are you Texas, New Mexico?
I'm in New Mexico.
Excellent. Where at?
Alamogordo.
Oh, nice. Okay. Sweet. So it is actually only 8:15, which is nice. I was worried you were in Texas and we're getting closer to the 10 o'clock hour, which is, I don't know, way past my bedtime. So, all right, Marissa. Well, let's go ahead and do it. Can you see my screen with my notes at the bottom?
Yeah.
Okay. So normally I would just show you the screen and the notes are for me, so you have to excuse my notes when there are horrific misspellings because I just typed them out quickly without editing them. But I can't figure out how to show you my screen without my notes. So is the screen large enough to read for you?
Yeah, so far.
Okay. So if we go to something like this, is that okay?
Can you go to the next slide, just so I can make sure the font gets a little smaller, but I think it should still be fine.
Okay. So we're okay for like that? Let me see. Is there a way to make it even bigger? I don't know. I don't know how this program works. Where's the full size? Somewhere in here there's a full size. Full screen.
I think it'll be fine unless you end up with really tiny font somewhere. So.
Okay. Good. How about that? Is that a little better?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Okay. Cool. Let me know if you can't read something, and we'll try to make it bigger. Okay, so real quick, just the objectives of this chapter. This is the airway management chapter, and so when we talk A, B, C, D, the primary assessment, this chapter is all about A and B, airway and breathing. All right, so just kind of keep that in your mind over these next couple of chapters. It's all about airway, breathing, circulation, and disability. And so I just want to kind of give you a framework for where Chapter 9 fits in. We're going to list anatomical structures. We're going to talk about how to open the airway with a couple different means. We're going to talk about how to clear a patient's airway, how to put a patient in their perfect position. We're going to talk about rigid suction using a suction device and a flexible suction device. Again, this stuff was going to be all about what we are going to experience on the Hill. Using an OPA and an NPA, oral pharyngeal airway and a nasal pharyngeal airway, we're going to do up on the Hill, describing how to calculate the oxygen flow. We'll give you the official book stuff, but then on the Hill we'll give you what's practical and what works. And then the biggest thing probably is setting up the oxygen tank and describing and demonstrating how to use the oxygen delivery systems A through E over here. And so again, we'll touch on them tonight and do more of it up on the Hill on, I think, like the 2nd, which I think is scheduled for right now. So anyway, here's the anatomy and physiology that Jeff had promised you. This one might be a little small to read on your screen, but the nasal cavity, obviously up by your nose here, nasopharynx. So everything basically the back of your throat is called the pharynx. You have the nasopharynx, which is first, and then the oropharynx. Think like oral pharynx, that's right there, and then the laryngeal pharynx, which is below your epiglottis, that little flap that keeps spit out of your lungs. So anyway, like Jeff was saying, just memorize this order of things because they're usually end up on the test in some way, shape, or form. But the big things we need to know for our work is nasal cavity, nasopharynx, and oropharynx. All right. First thing, when we get to a patient, we assess the airway, and so we have to learn how to manage that airway should we need to manage that airway. And we're going to use the head tilt chin lift maneuver, the jaw thrust maneuver, and the cross finger method. And so we're going to go through each of those. Airway management, what did I put down here? Basically, one of our patrollers this year got sent to a call of a lady who had a really, really bad accident, and she slid 40 feet in the snow. And when Quaid got there, he rolled her over. She wasn't breathing. He went, oh, no. And why isn't she breathing? And he looked in her mouth and realized, oh, shoot, she has a mouthful of snow. She's not breathing because her airway is blocked. And so he had to figure out how to unblock her airway. As soon as he unblocked the airway, she started breathing again. So here's a couple of different ways to maintain an airway. This one's called the head tilt chin lift, and we can only use this when we do not suspect a spinal cord injury. And the obvious reason why, I'll let you go ahead and answer that.
Because you can put the spine out of alignment, and that can create more damage.
Yeah, if they've got a neck injury and we're tilting their head back, that's just going to add to the injury. And so So, and by the way, we always suspect a spinal cord injury on a patient who's unconscious when we didn't see them go unconscious. So if we get to somebody and we see that they're not conscious, our assumption is they have a spinal injury. All right. So, but when they, we're talking to them and they just kind of pass out right in front of us, this is a good method to use, the head chin lift. And again, we'll go over that in CPR and on the hill. The airway management technique that we use when we need to keep the C-spine stabilized is called the jaw thrust, and we'll practice that on the dummies. We'll try to practice it on each other, but I hate it. I hate the feeling of when somebody does this to me. But we'll try it just so you can figure out what it's at. But it really is just moving that jaw kind of forward and up, and so your fingers are actually pushing the jaw forward or up, and your thumb is pushing the jaw forward, and so that pulls the tongue back up, so it stays off the back of the throat, which is what's usually preventing the airway from being open. And then this is how we get a patient who's not responsive, how we get their mouth open. You just crisscross your fingers and push their teeth apart. All right, clearing airway. Okay, so we just got through airway management techniques. Any questions?
Nope.
All right, clearing the airway, gravity, finger sweep, and suction. Here's a couple of different suction devices. The one on the left-hand side is the one that we have in our oxygen packs up on the hill. And it's a manual suction device. We'll play with it up on the hill. We also have on the right-hand side an automatic suction device. I think we have one of those at the trauma station in the first aid room, but we'll play with both of those. Oh, and by the way, if I have my option for clearing an airway, how do I get that snow out of that lady's mouth that Queen found? I'm turning her on her side and trying to get that out of her. You can use a finger sweep, but one of the things with the finger sweep is you never want to sweep farther than you can see. And again, this is part of CPR that he'll cover as well, but when you sweep that finger, you don't want to jam something further down the throat. And so he had to be careful when he was taking that snow out, how to get the snow out without jamming the snow further into her throat. So anyway. We'll go through that. Some general principles of using a suctioning device, like I was just showing you earlier. You got to pre-oxygenate the patient. So if you're giving them oxygen, give them a couple of high doses, then take the oxygen off, then do the suctioning. Make sure that you can see whatever you're about to suction, and we insert just the tip of the catheter without suctioning first. Then we begin suctioning, and we never suction farther than we can see. Again, so it's always whatever you can see. Turn the suction, we'll cover that. So this is just a real minor thing, but again, might end up on the test. It's suction for no more than 10 to 15 seconds. And one of the things that I do is when I'm suctioning a patient, I hold my breath. And I hold my breath because when I'm running out of air, I know my patient's running out of air as well. And so I stop suctioning after 10 to 15 seconds, and I put the oxygen back on or continue compressions or resuscitative breathing or whatever else. A child, you just have to remember they can't hold their breath for as long, so 10 to 15 seconds for a child. All right, and any questions about clearing an airway? So we talked about opening an airway, now we just finished clearing an airway. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Airway management. All right, so one of the things, when you have a patient who the only reason their airway continues to be occluded is because of the tongue that falls to the back of the throat, put them in the recovery position, high arm in endangered spine, Haynes or coma or left lateral recumbent position. We use this for unresponsive patients. They can't accidentally roll over onto their face. This is what it looks like. And if for whatever reason you needed them to lay on their side like that, you have a little more freedom then because you know they're safe. And again, in a mass casualty incident, this is a good option for people that are unconscious. All right, let's talk about managing. A more sophisticated way of managing an airway is using an NPA and an OPA. This is a nasal pharyngeal airway, and so this is what we're going to insert through their nostrils, down the back of their throat, and open their airway with that. You can do actually one in each nostril to help open their airway. And when you're using a nasopharyngeal airway, you want to size it, and we'll talk about sizing when we're up on the mountain, lubricate it, insert it, and we want to check to make sure it's working. And so just remember the acronym SLICK. Videos on this program don't work really well, so I'm not going to show it to you. But just go online and Google, application of an NPA, and you'll find all sorts of people that are awake and conscious and have that thing stuck up their nose. And they can do it. It doesn't actually hinder them. One of the things when you're using the nasopharyngeal airway is it's for patients that still have an intact gag reflex, and so you can put that in them even if they're semi-conscious. Does that make sense? That
yeah.
Even if they're kind of fluttery, kind of in and out of consciousness, you're having trouble maintaining the airway, stick a couple of NPAs in their nose. One, it might wake them right up, but two, it's not going to bother them in terms of causing them to gag or anything. Because when you use a OPA, an oral pharyngeal airway, which is inserted behind the tongue in the back of the throat there through the teeth, if they have a gag reflex at all, they'll start gagging as soon as you put this in. And if they start gagging, you need to remove it as soon as possible. And so we'll talk about how to insert that up there. And the acronym for this one, for the oral pharyngeal airway, OPA, is SICK. Size, insert, and check. So we'll do that up on the mountain. If you need to perform rescue breathing, you have a couple of different options for barrier devices. One of them is a face shield. This is what I carry in my summer pack because it's small and compact, and it's a one-way valve system. Something a little more sophisticated, but it's a little more bulky, is the mask system, and I carry that in my winter pack. Oxygen therapy. The reason, basically, just about every management. At the end of every chapter in this book has a section called management or treatment. And every treatment for just about everything includes the use of oxygen. So just go ahead and throw oxygen on people, all right? If they're short of breath, cardiac problems, chest pain, strokes, level of responsiveness, head injuries, fractures, just throw them on oxygen. The consequences for having too much oxygen are pretty minimal. As short-term as we do it. So throw them on oxygen for just about everything. We have a couple of different cylinders at Ski Apache. We have really, really large cylinders that we use bedside, and we have level D cylinders that we carry with us in our oxygen bags. And so they're a little smaller, obviously. We're going to cover the setup and breakdown of an oxygen cylinder and the respirator and the application of the mask up on the mountain, but just kind of remember this system, how to set it up. Inspecting, making sure everything's copacetic, making sure you crack the valve, that there's no dust that's going to blow through the regulator. Attach the regulator, open the oxygen valve, and then apply whatever amount of oxygen you need to apply. Safety, pretty common sense stuff. The biggest ones for us is protecting the actual cylinder itself from getting away from you. So always make sure that the cylinder is in a secure and safe location so that the cylinder doesn't start rocketing down the hill like a projectile. Oxygen therapy. Safety. Why is that on there? Oh, it doesn't really make sense. Anyway, nasal cannula. Let's go over what these look like really quick. So when we get up on the mountain and I ask you to do a nasal cannula, you know what you're talking about. This is the thing you most often see in hospitals. They have a very limited amount of oxygen that they can deliver, 1 to 6 liters per minute. We usually operate them at about 3 to 4, and the most you can do is 44% oxygen delivery. And it's well tolerated by patients because it doesn't occupy a lot of space. Next one is the non-rebreather mask. So you can have a flow rate of anywhere from 10 to 15. We always start at 15 and then titrate down as we need it. But always start high and then titrate down low when you know that you don't need as much oxygen. But you can deliver 80 to 90% oxygen content through a non-rebreather. But as you can see from this picture, on the left-hand side, the woman's, most of her face is covered and she's got this big bag coming down. Sometimes patients get a little anxious with that on their face. But it's your best, whenever you have a high level of trauma, heart attack, stroke, anything like that, we go ahead and put the non-rebreather on and high flow O2. Last one is a bag valve mask, which can deliver up to 100% oxygen, and it's part of a whole system that we use to help breathe for somebody. The ventilation bag in the middle is what we use to breathe for them. We'll go through that up there. 2-person, 1-person technique. Here's what 2 people look like doing it. Obviously, 1 person's holding the mask, the other one's pumping, and 1-person technique, you hold the mask and pump at the same time. This is what we will do. All right, pulse ox, we'll show you how to use that up on the mountain, but measures how much oxygen saturation is in the blood. And the oxygen saturation in the blood, it's not a foolproof measurement, and it shouldn't be the only way that we're measuring whether or not perfusion is happening for a patient. That's what it looks like. All right, gastric distension. So if we're breathing for somebody and we're pushing too much air, trying to shove too much air into their lungs, it'll just end up filling their stomach and causes all sorts of problems. So when we get there, we'll talk about you don't squeeze the bag, the ventilation bag, all the way down. You only squeeze it about halfway down. All right. So we talked about anatomy, upper airway and lower airway, and the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the laryngeal pharynx. We talked about airway management, how we get the airway open, how we clear an airway, how we maintain an airway using NPAs and OPAs, and then when we have to use breathing equipment, using personal protective equipment and rescue breathing. When we talked about oxygen therapy, we're going to show you how to set up a tank. We're going to talk about the 4 different delivery systems that we have for that and how to use a pulse ox. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Shock. When we talk about shock, we're really talking about the C of the A, B, C, and Ds, because shock is any time that the body is not getting adequate perfusion to itself. And so, you know, in ER, you always hear he's going into shock. And it's something that we experience at some level all the time at Ski Apache. Our bodies are always compensating for the reality that there's less oxygen up at that elevation. Our bodies are working harder up at that elevation. And so our bodies are always in some level of compensated shock when we're up on the mountain. And that means our patients are always at some level of compensated shock up on the mountain. So we're going to talk about compensated, decompensated, and irreversible shock. So we're going to define shock, describe the basic components of the cardiovascular system, the blood, the stuff, the pump, the heart, and then the pipes, the blood vessels. And so we're going to talk about the 3 stages of shock, list the 4 different types of shock, and then how the body compensates for shock. And we're going to look at classic signs and symptoms of what shock looks like for somebody in compensated, decompensated, and then irreversible. Irreversible is really easy to identify, so that's good. Describe and demonstrate how we manage shock. So we'll do that. All right. Anatomy and physiology. We've got the pump, we've got the pipes, and we've got the fluid. All right. And so that's kind of what it looks like. Again, kind of memorizing a little bit of this slide, just knowing generally. Arteries are those vessels that move blood away from the heart. Veins are those vessels that move blood towards the heart. So just as you're kind of thinking back through that, the blood goes from the heart to the lungs, back to the heart, to the body, and then repeats itself over and over again. I'm not sure I wasn't missing anything here. All right, let's talk about shock. Definition of shock is the failure of the circulatory system to maintain adequate blood flow to tissues, resulting in a state of inadequate perfusion in which cells do not receive sufficient amounts of oxygen and nutrients to meet their immediate metabolic needs. So, is there an easier way to sum that up that you can help me out with?
Inadequate blood supply?
Yeah, the body's not getting the blood to all the right places, right?
Yeah.
It's not carrying the nutrients where it needs to go. So first, we've got compensated shock. So up there at the top, compensated shock. And I've got 2 arrows and a dash. All right, the 2 arrows, because in compensated shock, the body's experiencing suboptimal conditions. For whatever reason, we'll talk about the various reasons the body can be experiencing these conditions, but it's suboptimal. So the body has to work harder in order to compensate for whatever's happening that it's causing to miss. And it does this in a couple of ways. First, tachycardia. Remember when we talked about Brady and tachy? Tachy is more, faster. So fast heart. So their heart rate's going to be higher. And when we get up on the mountain, we'll throw you on a pulse ox, and we'll throw me on a pulse ox, and we'll have you do assessments, and you'll see that, yeah, indeed, yeah, our heart rates are probably a little higher up there than they are down at lower elevations. Here in Ruidoso and even, or in Alamogordo and even here in Ruidoso. So heart rate's going to be a little higher. We're also going to breathe a little faster, tachypnea. So we're going to breathe a little faster to compensate. So we're pumping more oxygen in and breathing out more carbon dioxide to help the body compensate for these deficiencies. Our blood pressure is probably going to remain pretty normal in compensated shock. So higher heart rate, faster breathing, normal blood pressure. That's compensated shock. So some other symptoms. When you press on the nail bed, and you look to see how quickly the color in the nail bed returns. If it's more than 2 seconds, the body might be working harder to try to compensate and might be in shock. So that's one of the ways that we do that. We'll talk about that. Cool skin. So the body is shunting blood away from the surface of the body and more towards the vital organs, and so the skin might be a little cool, and then altered mental status. So they might not be getting enough. We might not be getting enough perfusion to the brain, and so we might be a little disoriented or confused, just a little bit. But the good news is compensated shock is reversible. We figure out what's causing it, and we figure out how to restore it. Decompensated shock. The body has now been failing to restore blood perfusion, usually for some period of time, or the reason for whatever has sent the body into shock has grown more than what the body can compensate for. So the heart rate goes up even more, breathing gets shallow and even faster, and the systolic blood pressure falls falls below 90. And so one of the ways that we know the systolic blood pressure falls below 90 is when you can no longer feel a pulse rate in their wrists, you know that their systolic blood pressure is probably below 90. So they can look real ash or gray or white. Their skin's going to be cool, and they're going to start, having that moist skin. They're going to start sweating. Their capillary refill is very delayed, and their level of responsiveness is going to continue to increase, so they get more disoriented. You can still treat decompensated shock, but there may be complications. And then irreversible shock, heart rate plummets, breathing plummets, blood pressure plummets, and irreversible shock is exactly that. You cannot survive it. It's death. The cells have died in the body, and the body is shutting down, and there's nothing we can do when somebody is in irreversible shock. All right, those are the three different types of shock: compensated, decompensated, irreversible. You especially need to know the difference between when somebody's in compensated and decompensated shock. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's talk a little bit about the 4 different types of shock. All right, and they list 4 different types of shock, but really it's only 3. But we'll talk about the 4. All right, one of them is called hypovolemic shock, and that's a problem with the substance inside the vessels, right? So your blood, there's not enough of it for various reasons. Either they've been bleeding so much, called hemorrhagic. They've actually lost so much blood that even though the heart is pumping, there's not enough fluid in there to pump. The other way that this can happen is non-hemorrhagic, forget it. And it can happen because of dehydration or burns. And up on Skiopathy, there's a number of reasons people can come to us with severe dehydration. A lot of times it's kids who've been sick for days, throwing up and having diarrhea, and then they try to go skiing because this is after all, a family vacation. And so we get the kids, and man, they're dehydrated in a really, really bad way. Or another fun one is alcohol. People come up wasted after having been drinking so heavily, and alcohol is a diuretic, and so you're typically dehydrated after you've been drinking alcohol, and the more alcohol you drink, the more dehydrated you are. So the other way is burns. Obviously, burns cause a lot of dehydration. So that's a problem with the stuff inside. So that's the volume of the content of blood. The next one is distributive, and that's a problem with the pipes. And inside our bodies, the vessels can constrict and dilate depending on where we need blood and how much of it we need and how much pressure we need to have it get there. And different things can interrupt the dilation of those blood vessels. A massive whole body infection, a septic infection, can cause the blood vessels to dilate. Neurogenic, your brain can actually cause those blood vessels to dilate if something has happened to the brain, or the spinal cord. A spinal cord injury can do that. And then anaphylactic shock is your body's autoimmune response to an allergen, and the blood vessels get all dilated. So, oops, I forgot that's what happens. The next one is cardiogenic shock. So you have a problem with the pump, and it can be a heart attack, so it's not pumping, heart trauma, medications that you're taking, or dysrhythmias. So a rhythm in the heart, instead of the 4 chambers of the heart working in good sequence and order, something's wrong and they just quiver, or they don't pump in the right order, and so there's not being an effective pump. A 4th one here is called obstructive, but it's really causing a problem with the heart. So tension pneumothorax is when the lung cavity is filling with fluid, and it can actually start obstructing the pumping of the heart. And so that's a tension pneumothorax. So you have to relieve that. It's not the fluid that's building up. It's air in the pleural space continues to build up because it's not being released normally. Pericardial tamponade is where the pericardium, which is that sac around the heart, for some reason fills with fluid, either because of bleeding or infection or a number of reasons, and it actually squeezes the muscles so that the muscles can't function the way they're supposed to. And then the last one is pulmonary embolism, which is why this one gets its own category, because a pulmonary embolism, an embolism is a blockage of some sort, whether it's an air bubble, fat, or a clot that blocks one of the vessels going away from the heart into the lungs, and the blood can't get there anymore. And so it's a pulmonary embolism that stops the blood from, it obstructs the blood from going where it needs to go. Factors affecting shock. Age is a big factor. Young kids and old people do not do well in shock. They might compensate for a while, but when they decompensate, they go quickly. And so, especially with kids, but older, the elderly, really older adults as well, making sure that you're right on top of them in terms of monitoring their condition. Illnesses, pre-existing conditions, medications, mind-altering stuff, over-the-counter medications. Just remember, when you ask, as Jeff was going through with you, what was I going to ask? When Jeff was going with you getting a patient history, when you do medications, make sure you ask about 4 categories of medications. Are you taking any medicines? No. Usually they think of prescription medication. Then you ask, are you taking anything over the counter? Oh yeah, I took a Tylenol. Great. Are you taking any it's getting late. Supplements, oils, things like that, because those can actually have a physiological effect on the body. And then also, are you taking any recreational drugs or alcohol? So when we ask for medications, those are all the things we want to know. Is what do they have on board? All right, before we go to patient assessment, any questions about the 3 different levels of shock, compensated, decompensated, or irreversible, or why shock is happening, whether it's the heart, the blood, or the vessels? Any questions? Cool. All right, patient assessment. We're going to do MOI. So we're going to do the scene size up, and we're going to see kind of clues, suggestions for the reason somebody might be in shock. And so let's look around and find out what's happened. If you see a big pool of blood, you got a good idea about why somebody's going into shock. And so just use your good common sense. Signs of shock: tachycardia, heart rate's up; hypotension, where there's not enough pressure in the system, and so you'll see that decompensated. Well, you'll see that in decompensated shock, where they're losing tension. Tachypnea, where they're breathing faster. Pale, cool, diaphoretic skin. Altered mental status. Basically, the good rule of thumb, if you can see my note down there, is something. If they look like something's wrong, and treat them like something's wrong. Don't wait and wonder, maybe they'll be okay. If you get that gut feeling like, wait a minute, you don't look right, just assume they're not right until they prove you otherwise. And so treat them like they're in shock. Management, we use high flow O2. We try to help the body return itself to homeostasis. We place them in shock position, which is laying down, maybe the feet elevated a little bit. And when we transport somebody who's in shock, we transport them head down. And like I said, just about everybody we treat has some level of shock. And so one of the reasons we always transport head down, because they're struggling with that.
Is that because you're trying to use gravity to have more of the blood go toward their brain?
Yeah.
Head down?
So if we're going to err on the side of anything, if somebody's in shock, it takes a lot of pressure off the heart and the work, because remember, our bodies are working harder to compensate for shock. So if we can help make it easier for our bodies, they'll do a better job at compensating. And one of the ways we make it easier is by laying flat, so it's front loading the pressure, so the heart doesn't have to do all the work to get the blood from the bottom to the top. And so if we're laying flat or even head downhill, it's a lot easier for that heart to get the blood where it needs to go, and it's not working near as hard as if, as opposed to standing or sitting up.
That
Does that make sense? Anything we can do to help make it easier for the body, we try to do. That's how I think of shock management. So my body is breathing harder and pumping my heart harder. How can I help that? Well, I can lay flat so my heart doesn't have to pump as hard, and I can put O2 on so that my body doesn't have to breathe as hard. And so now I'm helping my body in two ways. Let's see. Early recognition, that's the big deal, because there's a limited number of things that we can do on the Hill. We need advanced life support to get there so that they can put IVs in, so that they can give medicine like nitro or the opposite of nitro, which I can't remember off the top of my head. But always maintain, as you're treating a patient, a high index of suspicion for shock. Just assume that somebody's in compensated shock and ready to go to decompensated shock, and know what you're going to do if that happens. So recognizing, what was I going to say? Oh, recognizing the classic signs of shock is important. Do a careful examination of the mechanism of injury. Try to figure out, why are they going to shock? Do they not have enough blood? Are they having a heart attack? Is something stopping their heart from beating? Are they having an allergic reaction? Why are they going into shock? Monitor the subtle changes with their consciousness, their pulse pressure. These are early clues to help you figure out what to do next, while you help maintain the life of a person until advanced life support arrives. ABCs, 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 ABCs. Make sure they have an airway. Make sure they're breathing. Make sure see what their circulation is up to. If their heart's not doing the job, you got to do the job for it until they get to a definitive care facility. And so this is just kind of remember, this is emergency medicine. If their body can't do the job for itself, we have to do the job for the body. And so if that's breathing for a patient, we breathe for a patient. If it's CPR, we do CPR, compressions. We take over what the body can't do for itself as much as we can when the body's unable to. Shock, just again, a brief reminder, it's inadequate tissue oxygenation. For some reason, and there's hypovolemic, cardiogenic, distributive, and obstructive. Just remember those 4 reasons and try to figure out what's going on, because shock will kill you. All right, so let me tell you real quick. So I'm at a men's Bible study on Thursday morning. There's 6 of us sitting there. The guy leading the Bible study looks up at a guy named Ron across the way. And all of a sudden, we all notice Ron looks terrible. He's ashen white. He's sweating, even though he hasn't been doing anything. And we asked Ron, are you okay? And he mumbles something about needing to go home. And his lips are kind of doing this saggy thing. The eyeballs are drooping, the lips are kind of sagging, going, oh, wait a minute. Something's not okay. I rush over there, and I try to find a pulse on his wrist. I can't find a discernible pulse. He's talking still. He's upright. He's breathing. So I know his A and his B are okay. I'm worried about his C, his circulation, something's going wrong there. So I asked to call 911. We call 911, and while we're waiting for them, I'm still trying to find a pulse. I can't find a pulse in his wrist. So now I'm thinking, well, shoot, he's got low blood pressure, at least less than 90, which means of the 3 categories of shock, compensated, decompensated, irreversible, based on what I've described, what Ron has been experiencing, where do you think Ron is on those 3 levels of shock?
Decompensated?
Yeah, he's decompensated now. He's sweating, he's breathing heavy, his heart rate's probably fast, but the blood pressure's so low I can't find it. And so he's having a really hard time. I feel the pulse in his neck. So I go for his carotid artery up in his neck, and I can feel a pulse there just a little bit, but it's super irregular. Like it's not happening the right way. It's not a regular bump, 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 bump. It's bump, 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 bump. Bump, no bumps. It's super irregular. And of all the reasons he might be going in shock, what do I think is the reason he's probably going into shock? Is it a problem with the volume of blood in his system?
And if he hasn't been drinking enough water, maybe.
Yeah, but he would have to be pretty severely dehydrated to go into hypovolemic shock because of dehydration. And so
Maybe cardiac?
So say that again?
Maybe cardiac?
Yeah, probably cardiogenic. There's probably something wrong with the pump. Especially because I also know Ron's patient history because he's one of my parishioners. He's had multiple heart attacks over the last couple of years. His heart functions at about a 50% capacity anyway. And so I already know probably the reason for his going into shock is probably something to do with his heart. But his blood pressure, he's already in decompensated shock, so his blood pressure is already pretty low. Now, you haven't gotten here yet because you'll get to cardiac emergencies. Cardiac emergencies, they'll cover a thing called nitroglycerin tablets. And another guy, not even part of our group, from another table, runs over to Ron and says, "Ron, take this," and hands him a nitroglycerin tablet. Now, Jeff, if he's listening, he knows exactly what's wrong with this picture because one of the contraindications for using nitroglycerin is a low blood pressure. So before I can stop him, Ron pops the nitroglycerin tablet and dissolves it under his tongue. And I go, oh no, I'm pretty sure Ron's about to pass out. What nitroglycerin does is it dilates all your blood vessels. So if you already have low blood pressure and then you dilate the vessels, now you have even lower blood pressure. So I thought for sure Ron was going to pass out on me and I'd be doing CPR on him. So I was actually ready to do CPR on Ron because I thought he was going to do that to me. Now, Ron got lucky. Very, very, very lucky. The amount of nitroglycerin he took hit a sweet spot that nobody could have calculated for. It was just by the blessings of God. Because what happened was the dilation of the blood vessels also dilated the blood vessels in his heart muscles. And so his heart became more efficient in its beating. And when it became more efficient in its beating, it was able to overcome the dilated vessels of the rest of the body. And so something really weird happened that normally shouldn't have happened. I had to, after Ron took the nitro and it started to go into his body, I had a discernible pulse in his wrist again, which means his blood pressure went back up above 90. But that's just because Ron was very blessed that day. That's not what should have happened. That's the kind of thing they would have done in a hospital setting, with a drip line and an IV and given him just the right amount of nitro. This was just some guy throwing his prescription at Ron and Ron taking it with it before I could tell him not to. But yeah, Ron was in decompensated shock. Now, of the ways that we treat decompensated shock, or shock in general, I did not have O2, so I couldn't give him O2. But I was monitoring Ron, keeping track of his breaths per minute, keeping track of his pulse, his pressure as best I could. But what didn't I do for Ron that I should have done of the ways that we treat and manage shock?
Did you get him into the Trendelenburg position?
Yeah, I should have just laid him down. I should have gotten him out of his chair, and I should have laid him on the floor, and I should have elevated his feet just a little bit, take a little pressure off that heart. I just left him in his chair, because it was convenient. But upon looking back on it, yeah, I should have laid him down. I feel not vindicated, but certainly, it was odd because the paramedics and the EMTs that came, they didn't lay him down either when they really should have. So, yeah, it's kind of like, oh well. But they did some other things I didn't agree with, like they never put him on oxygen when that should have been the first thing they did, is put him on oxygen while they're trying to monitor everything else and find out what's going on. But anyway, so that's my little story of dealing with decompensated shock this last week, which was pretty awesome.
Did you hear the story from the ER? It was on that TV show about the patient that passed out 3 times in one day, and every time EMS brings him into the ER. And finally the doctor followed him home. Show me exactly what you're doing. And the wife's like, well, every time he passes out, it's right after I put his hemorrhoid cream on. And so they go in and they look, and they found out that he had a nitroglycerin cream. And it was the poor guy would go to the bathroom, and his wife would put a little bit of Preparation H on, and he'd pass out.
Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah, that would do it. That would do it. All right. Any questions, comments, concerns about shock?
Nope.
Okay, sweet. We're going to do chapter 11 and 12 fairly quick, just because there's not a whole lot to cover. The biggest chapter that we'll cover up on the mountain is chapter 9, because there's lots of skills involved with chapter 9. Chapters 10, 11, and 12 are just information you need to know in your mind to how to deal with somebody's in shock. Altered mental status is that D. Are they having some disability that you need to calculate, that you need to account for when you're doing your primary assessment? So their air is fine, their breathing's fine, their circulation seems to be okay, but they're confused, they're disoriented. Why is that happening? So you need to address that in your primary assessment. So objectives, define it. AEIOU tips, again, another one of our wonderful acronyms. Compare diabetes, signs and symptoms, demonstrate the treatment of the following medical conditions: hypoglycemia, hyperglycemia, partial seizure, general seizure. Stroke, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about assessment of a patient and treatment of a patient with altered mental status. So we're going to cover the anatomy, what is AMS, behavioral and altered mental status, and chapter summary. Okay, anatomy, physiology. We got the brain and the spinal cord, which is central nervous system. There's 3 main parts of the brain, and it's all protected by the skull. There's the brain stem, which controls the basic life functions. The cerebellum controls balance and coordination, and the cerebrum controls emotions, thought, speech, blah, blah, blah. All that good stuff. The spinal cord connects the central nervous system of the brain to the peripheral nervous system. And we know what the spinal cord is. That goes through the vertebrae in the back. The spinal cord is part of the central nervous system. The rest of the nervous system is part of the peripheral nervous system. So it's basically the central nervous system and everything else. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Young Frankenstein, but there's this fantastic scene, which I can't show you, that demonstrates the difference between voluntary and involuntary motion. If you're a fan of the movie, it's a fantastic scene. Highly encourage rewatching the whole movie just for that scene. It really is just because I like the movie. All right, anatomy, physiology. The endocrine system regulates the level of glucose available to the nervous system. That's what the nervous system functions off of, is the glucose. And so if you're not having enough of it for whatever reason, or you have too much of it, both are bad. Altered mental status can be global or localized. Global means it's affecting the entire nervous system. Decreased responsiveness, abnormal activity. Localized or focal altered mental status is affecting a portion of the body, either weakness in one particular area, balance, vision, speech abnormalities. So just remember it can be global or local. AEIOU tips. Just know what each of these terms are. Alcohol and acidosis. Make sure you know what those terms are. Epilepsy, the environment, electrolytes. How can those things affect your mental status? Insulin, not having enough of it. Oxygen overdose, uremia, trauma, tumors, infection, poisoning, psychiatric problems, seizures, stroke, and syncope. You know what? I was going to look up syncope because I can't ever remember what syncope is. I want to say it's like passing out. Oh, shoot. Jeff, any help there? Syncope.
Temporary loss of consciousness caused by falling blood pressure, according to Google.
Nice. Okay. Syncope. Good. Passing out. I like pulled that out of nowhere. It's awesome. All right. So syncope. Yeah. So that passing out. So when somebody faints, basically, they see blood and they don't like blood. They're like, oh no. Their vessels all dilate at the same time and they lose the blood pressure and then they pass out. Where am I at here? All right. Hey, a really, really useful tool for identifying when somebody has an altered mental status and why they might have that altered mental status is a medical alert tag. So when somebody's being goofy, do a quick sweep of their neck and their wrists to see if they have some sort of medical alert tag, because they may not be able to give you any reasonable patient history if they're on their own. So they might be as goofy as all get out, and they can't tell you why. So the medical alert tags are super helpful. Conditions associated with AMS, seizures. Let's see if there's anything I need in there for you. Not really. I think we'll go over seizures and how to treat them in just a minute. But partial seizures and generalized seizures, just one point of a twitch or something that's happening versus a whole body sort of thing that happens. When you're dealing with a seizure, because I can't remember if we actually get to it, just protect them from harm. Don't try to stop them. Don't try to pin them. Don't put anything in their mouth, for heaven's sake. Just protect them from harm and monitor their A, B, C, and Ds. And when somebody's had a seizure, initiate medical transportation right away. All right. Another reason somebody might have altered mental status is because of diabetes. And so you can have type 1 diabetes, which is a genetic condition, a disease that you have. And it has nothing to do with your weight or anything like that. Type 2 diabetes, it happens because our A1C levels are too high and usually associated with obesity. You can have gestational diabetes, pregnant, and then other. You can have different reasons: hormone-related disorders, drug or chemical effects, genetic defects in the action of the insulin, or genetic defect in the insulin production cells. So those are the 4 types of diabetes. Hypoglycemia. Just remember what's hypo?
Low.
Low, yeah. When something's hypo, it's low. So low glycemia. Blood sugar that's less than 70. It can happen because the patient took too much diabetic medication, or took the medication and then didn't eat enough to compensate for it. And so their blood sugar gets low. And so like a patient with type 1 diabetes, I think I'm getting this right, they take their insulin. And if they take too much insulin, it's actually lowering their glycemic level, and so they're going to have low blood sugar, which is why the best way to help somebody who is hypoglycemic is just to give them a little sugar pack and some water, things like that, to help raise their blood sugar levels as quick as possible to get them out of it. So they can have anxiety, dizziness, their heart rates can go up, diaphoresis, which is that sweatiness, the cool sweatiness of the skin. They can be having tremors, headaches, confusions, concussions, and they can still swallow. And if you just give them a little bit of sugar, as long as they're able to take it themselves, you don't have to be able to swallow. You can't give it to an unconscious patient. They'll come out of their hypoglycemia pretty quick. Hyperglycemia, which means the sugar is too high. Patient hasn't taken any diabetic medication. Polyuria, as terpene, polydipsia. Mud dyspsia. I don't remember what dyspsia is. Dry mouth and fatigue. They can have nausea, they can have vomiting, they have abdominal pains, altered mental status, coma, injury, death. The interesting thing about hyperglycemia, though, is that it's not something that happens in short order. Like, you have to have hyperglycemia for a really long time before anything really, really bad happens. And there's nothing really you can do to bring it back down to a level that's helpful anyway that we have. So when somebody shows signs of hyperglycemia, you just say, hey, you need to see a doctor ASAP, because we're not going to be able to help them with that. But in terms of emergency medicine, we're going to deal with hypoglycemia and its effects much more, and deal with it in an emergency way much more than we will hyperglycemia. That'll be something that they're struggling with a doctor, typically type 2 diabetes. So. All right, strokes. 3 types of strokes. It's a neurological impairment of some sort where there's low or no blood flow to the areas of the brain. Ischemic strokes, hemorrhagic strokes, and TIAs. Ischemic strokes are the most common. There's a blockage of some sort preventing blood from getting to a part of the brain. It's an embolism, stops, blood clot, fat, from fractures, a cholesterol plaque, something like that, has stopped blood flowing to a part of the brain. That's the most common. Hemorrhagic is there is a bleeding happening inside the brain, and it's putting pressure on other parts of the brain, and so that's what's causing the stroke. And then TIAs are like basically little mini strokes. They're temporary interruption of blood flow. No permanent damage is done. Usually resolved in 24 hours, but it could be the early warning signs of something worse coming. And so TIAs we make a big deal of them to make sure that they get to definitive medical care as soon as possible. All right. Any questions about diabetes, stroke, or other causes for altered mental consciousness?
Nope.
Great. Patient assessment. Remember, we always do primary scene size up, then the primary assessment, which is assessment. Why doesn't it like my assessment? Did I spell it wrong? Oh, I did. Huh, fascinating. primary assessment A, B, C, D, right? And secondary assessment is sample, OPQRST, head to toe, and vitals. And then you just monitor for changes. So primary assessment, do that all the time. Primary assessment, after we get the scene size up done, we do our primary survey of the ABCDs. We do the alert. Are they responsive to our verbal cues? Are they responsive to pain? Are they unresponsive? And then we look for clues. Hypoxia, hypoglycemia are the two most common causes of AMS. So they're not getting enough oxygen, or they're not getting enough glucose. And so let's figure out which of those two is it probably. And then with any altered mental status, always activate EMS, because no matter what the problem is, it's always bad. So get EMS going. So how do we manage a patient with altered mental status? We don't actually have a lot of resources to do that, but we make the most of the resources we have. So we monitor their ABCDs, and remember, emergency medicine, if something's not happening, we do it for them. So we monitor their ABCDs to make sure that their ABCDs are functioning. We provide high flow O2. It's another one thing we have. We'll use a bag valve mask at 15 liters per minute. Provide sugar to an awake diabetic patient. If you find out they're diabetic and they've got altered mental status, just give them sugar. If it doesn't help, it doesn't hurt them. But if you give it to them, it's probably going to help them. Consider spinal precautions if they have altered mental status and they're laying on the floor, because they're not going to be able to tell you that this hurts or that hurts or I can't feel my legs because of their altered mental status. In fact, if we come upon somebody that has altered mental status, we always treat them as if they have a spinal injury as well, because we don't have a reason not to. And then you activate EMS and provide rapid transport as soon as possible. Violent behaviors, when a patient is uncooperative, you can't force them to do anything. Keep yourself and the other customers and patrollers safe. That's the most important thing. And wait until you get more help and people with higher authority to do that. Just keep talking in calm, reasonable ways with them. Do not use of force. There may be a time when to do that, but it probably won't be our call to make, unless it's extreme circumstances. But do not use of force. That's about it. AEIOU tips, remember that. Patients with altered mental status are load and go. Monitor them and get them out of there to definitive care as soon as possible, because if it's altered mental status because of low blood flow, because of shock, if it's a stroke, all of that stuff needs to be treated ASAP. And we always put high flow O2 on for all altered mental status patients. Just put them on them until we can get a good pulse ox reading on them, and then we can titrate down from there. But always just automatically go to 15 liters per minute. Give sugar to a diabetic. That has an intact gag reflex. Just give them sugar. It's not going to hurt them if they have too much sugar anyway. You're not going to make it worse. So just give them sugar. And if somebody's having a seizure, keep them from hurting themselves. Do not put anything in their mouth, and then monitor their ABC and Ds. Any questions on AMS?
Nope.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about one of the reasons somebody might have altered mental status is because of substance abuse and poisoning. All right. We're going to talk about the 4 ways drugs enter the body and move through the body, 4 routes of absorption, and define the following terms. We're going to talk about the difference between poison, substance, and toxin. We're going to talk about 3 commonly abused substances, which you could probably guess. If I had to give you a chance to guess, what are the 3 most commonly abused substances?
Alcohol. Yeah. Mainly I think of alcohol. I'm not sure what else.
Actually, one of the odd ones on there is acetaminophen, Tylenol. Tylenol is a huge problem because it's such a quick damage to the liver. And we'll talk about alcohol, Tylenol, and we'll get to it because I can't remember the top of my head. Signs and symptoms commonly associated with use substances, and then demonstrate proper care. And then you'll need to memorize at least one of the two emergency resources for poison or chemical-related information. All right. Again, same topics: anatomy, physiology, common abuse of substances, assessment, management, chapter summary. All right. Here we go. Physiological actions. All right. This is how do we get the drugs into the body. Absorption is the way the substance or poison enters the body, and you can do it through ingestion, eating it, inhalation, breathing it, transdermal through the skin, or injection through a hypodermic needle. All right, and then we have to talk about the distribution. How does the substance get transported? And where is it going to hit first, and how is it going to get there? Metabolism, how does the body break it down, and then how does the body eliminate it? All right, commonly abused substances, inhalation, misusing, resulting in impairment or distress, and so that's the basic definition of a substance being abused. Poison, common household things. Acetaminophen is the most common poison that's given too much to children. Because what happens is like up at the ski area, parents will give, hey, I'm giving my kid Tylenol because he's got a fever. But then I'm also going to give him Dayquil. And if you read the active ingredients in Dayquil, it includes a whole nother dose of Tylenol. And so overdosing ourselves or our children is a big deal. Aspirin can be overdosed, acid bases, alcohols, sedatives, cocaine, ethanol, hallucinogens, marijuana, methane, narcotics, PCP, meth, all that stuff kind of falls under the category creating a substance or poison-related emergency. All right. An assessment of this is, again, the scene size up. When we're dealing with somebody who's been poisoned, or especially someone who's been poisoned, got to figure out why. Is it something they breathe? Well, we don't want to run in there and breathe the same thing. Is it something they're covered in? I don't want to run in there and get that same stuff on my skin and become a patient myself. So when it comes to this stuff, you have to be really, really careful on the scene size up in order to assess the hazards and not become a patient yourself. Primary assessment is super important. Again, ABCDs, figure out their mental status, and then reassess regularly, because that poison, that substance, can be getting worse while the metabolism is breaking it down in them as it's being absorbed by the body, so you need to keep a constant eye on it. And then do your sample, a really, really good sample. So what are your vital signs? Look for pills, containers, paraphernalia. When you're doing, again, I'll re-emphasize when you're taking, when you get to the M part of sample and you're talking about medications, it's a fourfold ask. It's a fourfold question. What prescriptions, what over-the-counter, what herbal or natural and supplemental medications, what recreational medications, that sorts of thing. I had one guy, when I asked him, is he taking anything? He said he's taking a beta blocker, right? So it's intentionally slowing his heart down, but his heart rate was going through the roof, and I couldn't figure out why his heart rate was so high, even though he was just sitting there and resting. Well, when I got back to the control room, he had a dislocated shoulder, but I was still trying to figure out why his heart rate was so high other than the pain. And we got more in depth about the medications he was taking. He said, oh yeah, I also took Sudafed today because I had a stuffy nose. And oh yeah, because we're up here at altitude, I took my Ventolin inhaler. Well, Sudafed and the medicine in the Ventolin inhaler are going to increase your heart rate. And so it made sense to me then why his heart rate was so high was because he was on these stimulants, and Sudafed and the Ventolin and they were doing more than his beta blocker was doing. So anyway, always good to ask a lot about medications. So assistance when you need it, depending on what's going on. If you need the fire department, law enforcement because they're using drugs, or law enforcement because they're a hazard to you or themselves, or a hazmat team if it's a substance that's a hazardous material that's hazardous to many people. Reduce exposure. Never make somebody vomit while they're in the field. Let's do that in a controlled environment at the bequest of poison control. For topical poisons, if something's on their skin, brush it off. If it's dry, or rinse it away if it's watery. If it's in their eye, rinse thoroughly with water. Irrigate with sterile water. We have got vials and vials of sterile water up at the ski area to do that with. For inhaled poisons, you got to get them out of whatever they inhaled. You got to get them on the high flow O2 and consider ALS because it could be deteriorating their lung tissue to the point where it's not recoverable. We can use activated charcoal. I think we have there's nothing in our protocols that limit us from using active charcoal. If you had to ask me where the active charcoal was in the patrol room, I have no idea. That just tells you how often we use it. And besides, the number one thing we're going to do is call for transport through the ambulance, and then contact the Poison Control Center, 800-222-1222. So just memorize that number, 800-222-1222. That's it. I'm done. I'm fried. How are we doing?
Oh, it was good. A lot of information, but yeah, good.
yeah, it is a lot of information. Hopefully it's something that you can absorb at a more rational pace by just reading the book and doing all the studying associated with it. That's my biggest thing when I went through this. I did really, really well in the class, not having come from any medical background. And the reason I did so well is before every session I had already read all the chapters ahead of time and done all the studying ahead of time. And then when I went through these lectures, it was just a reaffirmation of stuff I already kind of knew. And then when we got up on the hill, it was the opportunity to practice stuff now that I already had down cold. And so like Jeff had said, really, really the most important thing you can do in addition to studying the material itself is practicing your patient assessment. So going through, what is included in a scene size-up? How do I know? What's included in my primary assessment? And how do I know what to do? What do I need to call for in my radio call? What do I now do in my secondary assessment? How do I ask the question for sample, OPQRST? How do I do a head-to-toe assessment? Practice that on somebody. Find a friend who's going to laugh at you and give them an injury and just say, hey, you broke your arm, so sorry, let me do an assessment on you. Or, hey, you're having a heart attack, let me do an assessment on you. And just to practice it. I've got 2 kids and a wife, and when I went through OEC, at least once a week, I would go through each one of them and just give them, the kids got a kick out of it eventually because they started coming up with their own ailments, which my favorite was when my son decided he had a brain injury. And so he's acting all goofy and confused, which he thought was hilarious. But it just gave me the opportunity to practice my assessment. Even if I'm not sure how to treat yet, because we still have so many more chapters to learn how to treat different things, don't worry about the treatment, just worry about that assessment. To ask the right questions and figure out how to now apply ABCDs, for example, how to do a PRST as fast as we can. In the law as you can. English, I believe, is that right? Jeff?
Yep. I think you're picking up a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I couldn't tell the last sentence or two, but mostly, yeah. It's kind of crunchy.
Yeah. But that's it. Thanks for hanging in there. That was a long night.
This is probably one of the longer ones. They do get a little bit shorter, so.
Okay.
All right.
I'll finish catching up with the reading, but yep. Thank you.
If you have any questions, send out a little post on the Facebook page, and we'll do our best to answer. Otherwise, I'll look forward to seeing you on site.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay. I'll see you then.
Thanks, Jeff. Do you need anything from me?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Then I'm hanging up.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.